Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take this out. I'll watch this in the background. Good morning. Can you tell? Like, I just woke up. It's early here. Good morning, Robin. Nice to have you. It's nighttime where you are. No, what time is it? I don't know. It's middle of the night. So, yeah, they haven't started yet. Scheduled start time is 2 minutes ago. The defendant is in the courtroom. Good morning, Kim. I was just saying the defendant is in the courtroom. Let me take care of some housekeeping. If you're watching back on the replay, welcome to the live closing arguments of the Ice Cream Man murders. Michael Keatley is on trial for the murders of Juan and Sergio Guitron. Good morning, Cheryl and Kim. Good morning, Tippy Joy. Yeah, I'm watching it in the background, so just trying to think what else I need to do. The coffee's brewing, so we're taking care of that. Yeah, I see the attorneys milling about. Nothing really going on. It's supposed to start at 8:30 and I'm awake. Hold on. There. Yeah, so if you're watching back on the replay, let me know you watched. Leave me a comment, #replay, and we're going to start the day here. I need to do a couple of logistic things in the background here. Wow, it's early. It's still dark out. What the heck? Okay, I'm going to pull this up on my iPad so I can follow along here as well. All right, the judge is not in the courtroom for some reason. Maybe he didn't wake up on time. 5:30 where you are. Oh my gosh. Good morning, Lynn. Yeah, so it's really early for you guys. I shouldn't complain then. I'm no more complaining because it's not 5:30 here. Holy cow. I'm watching the feed in the background. I'll pull it up when the judge comes in. Unless you guys want to watch the attorneys milling around. Oh, they just went to the seal. So now you're not even going to get to see the attorneys. It's on the seal. Oh my goodness. I tried to go to bed early last night. It didn't work. I was still up till like 1:30 in the morning. Okay, judge is in the courtroom. I'm going to bring up the feed. I will mute myself while this is going on. Don't forget to remind me to unmute before I start talking. Oh, you're welcome, Lynn. Anytime.
And there is another truly brief matter to bring up.
Okay. I'm listening.
Okay. So I know the full or full.
Oh, wait. Do we need, we don't have majority.
I think.
I don't think.
Well,
I'm just straightening up my desk, getting all the case law and stuff to the side.
You see right there.
I have them in my hand. Give me a moment also to draw my. Oh, go ahead. You can speak. I can multitask. I'm just trying to sign onto my computer.
Yes, sir. We want to make sure we did not do it yesterday, but after we rested, the time presents for us to make a judgment of acquittal again.
Right.
I'm presuming, and I'm fine with this, that we would do it similar to how we did when we approached the bench, that we're making this motion right now. So that
But I'll allow you time to argue it after we get them out.
Yes, sir. So you understand we have properly made the motion at the proper time. We've not waived that. We would like you to reserve at this point in time on judgment of acquittal. try that again. Waiting for further argument. I also would renew all the motions that have been filed from Mr. Carr to Ms. Gowdy to Mr. Escobar, Mr. Grant, and the rest of us. We would also renew all of our objections, so we would want the record to reflect that we have done what we need to do at the appropriate time, reserving for further discussion.
Absolutely. And again, same rulings on all prior motions going all the way back to the beginning of this case and the multiple judges that have presided over the case. So I'm not changing anything now at this point. So same rulings, including same rulings to all motions and or objections that came up during the trial. I will reserve on your renewed motion for judgment of acquittal to hear further argument after the jury has retired to begin deliberations.
Number two, again, just to make sure I'm good on the record, we had a lengthy and vigorous discussion yesterday throughout the jury instructions. We asked for 2 special instructions. The court heard my argument and considered the law. The court has denied that. I also wanted to make sure maybe Ms. Johnson can help confirm. We did address the circumstantial evidence instruction that appears to have been presented at the last trial by then attorney Gowdy. Ms. Johnson had indicated that request had been denied at that point. I looked into it further. I think Ms. Johnson, Ms. Johnson is correct in what she said. Nonetheless, I can't recall whether you said you were or we're not going to do it or consider it. We're asking you, first of all, I'm going to ask you to reconsider on the 2 special instructions. I'd like to make all those arguments again that you're well familiar with, re-urge them now. Secondly, I'd ask you to do the circumstantial evidence instruction and put that in the packet as well.
Okay. Same ruling on the specials, and that is all preserved for the appellate record. Should I be wrong on those? I did say that I would rule today in case there was any additional stuff, but that based on my recollection and the case law on the circumstantial instruction and the comments from the Florida Supreme Court, I believe in the standard instructions from where it was removed, that I would be denying that request. Was there anything different? I left it open just in case you all saw something maybe, super recently that addressed it. But my recollection is it was well argued in this case 3 years ago, and the status of the law at the time was such that I believe it was appropriately denied.
I'll defer to Ms. Johnson. Right. After I make this very quick comment, we rest on the previous argument by Ms. Gowdy, which we believe is persuasive, and the argument I made yesterday.
Well made, but nonetheless, I think that there's case law and commentary from the Florida Supreme Court in the instructions that address it, and that the probable cause instruction sufficiently addresses it, which is the grounds for the basis to deny the request for a special instruction.
The reasonable burden.
Which is, yeah, I don't know. What did I say? What did
Probable cause.
Well, it does. It defines probable cause in that same instruction. So in my mind, it's the probable cause instruction, but it is the reasonable doubt instruction as well. So that's my ruling. I'm going to deny the request, but again, it is preserved for the record. You never know. I've seen the Supreme Court reverse itself sometimes and say, oops, we were wrong. We should have been given that instruction all along. And if you hadn't preserved it, you may not be in a position to take advantage of their change of heart. But as I sit here right now, that is not the case. So I am going to deny the request.
Understood.
Let's talk, if we can, now about seat number 12, formerly juror number 130, who indicated yesterday, we've known all along, she's been indicating that 5:30 is the latest she can stay. I told them yesterday, though, that I suspected they would be getting the case for deliberations this afternoon and to be prepared to go late. And she reiterated to the bailiff yesterday that she absolutely, under no circumstances, could stay past 5:30. She has children issues. No one else can pick them up. She even went so far as to say that she's got car seats in her car for those children. So I brought it up because the bailiff notified me yesterday and said we would readdress it this morning. But I will let you know that I am certainly not inclined to, they will be deliberating to consider sending them home at 5:30 if they've not reached a verdict.
Your Honor, we have spoken, our team has spoken about that particular issue. It was a juror that we have selected. It's a juror that we want to be part of the jury that makes this decision. If it means that she has to go home at 5:30 and we come back Saturday in order to continue our deliberations, then that is what the defense position should be. If it means that we come back Monday and we continue deliberations on this particular matter, that's the defense position. We believe that justice demands at this point in time, since we've selected her, and she is willing to continue to be a member of this jury panel, but has some concerns after 5:30, that we should accommodate her in this particular case in whatever fashion we need to accommodate her to make sure that she continues to be a juror.
That's interesting. Not something I had considered, because what's the state's position?
Judge, we'll defer to defense. I don't really have a position. I would like to stay late if we can, but obviously she was selected and she cannot stay later than 5:30 then.
Gosh, she may have even made arrangements last night. Who knows?
Well, I don't mind bringing her in. That was one of the things, unless there was an agreement, I don't anticipate or presume anything, but I was suspecting one of the options was that you all were going to agree that since she's indicated yesterday she can't stay past 5:30 to release her. That's not the case. So one of my thoughts was we bring her in and inquire of her, and that may be appropriate at this time because you're right. Perhaps she went home realizing and was able to make some other arrangements. So I'm inclined to bring her out, ask her. Since I suspect now that there is a possibility that we are going to send everyone home at 5:30 if she hasn't made other arrangements, I'm also going to ask her while she's out here, number one, whether she's available tomorrow. If she has no one else to pick up her kids at 5:30, I suspect she has no one else to care for her children on Saturday.
Judge, my only concern would be is I don't think we should bring her out now. At some point in time, if we're getting close to 5:30, that issue can be resolved.
No, absolutely not. Because if I'm going to strike her and somebody else is going to replace her and go back, it can stay past 5:30.
Why are we going to strike her because she can't go past 5:30? We just stop at 5:30.
Well, I have my hopefully staff attorneys who are listening in doing research on that, because I want to know if there's authority for me to strike her if she can't participate in deliberations with the rest of the jury beyond a certain point. So that's why I said this was somewhat of a surprise and may result in us taking a break this morning for me to do some research. But I can assure you I'm not going to wait, because if I make a decision, it's going to be before and an alternate's going to replace her. So that's why I'm not waiting until 5:30 to decide or bring her in and ask her if she has to go home at 5:30. No, I don't agree with all due respect, I don't agree with that strategy at all. Yes.
Judge, I was just talking to co-counsel, the only other concern we have if we stop at 5:30 is just, we don't know if the other jurors have any issues with next week. So that's the only other consideration why it might be better to go later tonight. Like, we just don't know.
I agree. And so, Mr. Escobar, what if we haven't cleared this jury for next week? So what if I do exactly that? I say, you know what? I'm going to start letting them deliberate. Now at 5:30, oh, let's bring them in. Yes, number 12, I've got to go home, Judge. I absolutely. Okay, can you come back tomorrow? No, I can't. Okay, so now let's talk about Monday. Other jurors, can you come? No, I can't. So it's a mistrial.
Judge, I don't think so.
Without a doubt, it's a mistrial.
I don't think so, because they've got a duty in order to serve as a juror in this particular case. And we can make accommodations for those particular jurors to make sure that they can continue to serve this particular community. When you get served
So
with
give me the accommodation when a juror says, you only cleared me through this Friday. Next Monday, I'm getting on a plane to go out of town.
Your Honor, the duties of a juror first come first here. And that's just the way that it is. And I know that that's harsh, okay? But it's part of our system of justice in this country, not just in Hillsborough County,
Well,
in this country.
Then the
And
answer is
so-
easy. She's not picking up her kids.
No, Judge. I think that we should accommodate her whenever we can. But there are times, okay, that we may not be able to accommodate a juror. But this juror was selected by us. We want this juror to serve on this particular jury. And I think that we can make certain movements in our schedule that will please everybody. And we'll continue to have this juror as a member of this panel.
Well, but see that presumes that all the other 11 are either available tomorrow or are available on Monday. And without inquiring of them, I have no way of knowing.
Well, then inquire. Then bring them all in and tell them what the situation is, and bring them all in if you want to talk to them as a group. I don't have a problem with that. However, I do not want to strike a juror just because a juror has said now, hey, listen, I've got to go home at 5:30, when we've been stopping every day at 5:30 to accommodate her. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to be deciding this case, and now she's not a good juror because she has to go home at 5:30. She's made that clear to all of us. We selected her knowing that.
All right. Oh, there's got to be case law. I'm going to ask. I know we're contacting our staff attorneys to research this issue. I'm asking whether the state or the defense has some excellent research attorneys, whether there's any, and reminding that you would be required to disclose to me research either way. But on the issue of a juror who's unable to deliberate past a certain time, and whether it's appropriate to strike them prior to the deliberations. So it's a real issue. Only because I don't know of what lies past 5:30. I don't know if there's 6 of them that can't come back on Saturday and 6 of them that can't come back on Monday, but that could deliberate till midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, like we've done here so many times before, and not had one juror who says 5:30 and I'm done. So it's a situation, to be honest with you, I've never been presented with before, but I hesitate to accommodate the 5:30 juror, and the consequence be that I've got 4, 5, 6 that can't come back Saturday or Monday, in which case I don't see any other than declaring a mistrial. Or maybe then I see, okay, well, what day next week can all of you come back? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? And I don't think that's in anybody's best interest to delay. I don't like delaying until Monday. Start your deliberations today. At 5:30, we're going to break, and then you're going to come back Monday morning and pick up where you left off on Friday at 5:30. I don't like that, but there's nothing against it, and it has been done. But if now I've got somebody else, one of the 12, who is out of town on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, are you suggesting I'm in a situation to accommodate the 5:30 individual, and they don't have a verdict by 5:30 today, to now say, okay, well, we're coming back next Thursday?
Judge, we cannot accommodate every wish of a juror. We try to be reasonable with all of them to make sure that nobody is overly inconvenienced. But when they get served with a jury summons, that is their duty to come here and to serve. And so we've got to have a balancing approach. Just because someone has said, hey, I've got to leave at 5:30, when we all have selected that juror to serve on this jury.
Well,
and
let me
now
ask you this
now
way.
at the 12th hour, we're saying, oh, you know what? Let's just remove her because, as she said all along, I've got to leave here at 5:30. We chose her for a reason.
Okay, but here's the thing, and you all can check your notes and remind me if that came up only during the trial or if that came up during selection.
I'll have to take a look at it.
Well, and I'll allow it, because that's a different story. If we selected her knowing that she had to stop at 5:30, then your argument may have some legs to it. But if that came up afterwards, and that's something that we should have and could have taken into consideration when selecting her, and could have called her in and questioned her specifically, we understand that, and we can accommodate that every day except for deliberations. And is there any accommodation you made? Because that's the questions that I would have had for her before I allowed you to select her, or before a jury was sworn. So I don't know whether that was something that she disclosed to us or disclosed to us afterwards.
And frankly, the court was very gracious with the Venari in letting them know that, hey, you were not going to keep them late. And so she may have just assumed at that point in time that was going to be the process throughout the trial. I don't know. We'll check and see what our notes say, but that's the defense position.
So, well, the defense position is that if number 12 can't deliberate past 5:30 tonight, that we proceed and we stop deliberations today at 5:30 if they haven't reached a verdict.
Stop today, come back tomorrow, come back Sunday, come back Monday. Whatever accommodates this jury in order to continue their duty to serve as a juror in this case.
All right. Well, State, did you want to further be heard?
Judge, we'll do some research on it.
Yep, I'm going to do some research too. We'll be in recess. Thank you all very much.
Oh my word. Does that mean they're going to do the research right now before the jury comes in? Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Robin. The coffee's still brewing. I forgot to hit the button this morning. Wow. They never start on time. Never. And now they're going to adjourn to do research. Wow. So how did they not know this yesterday when they dismissed the jury? Maybe she came to him afterwards. I don't know. Yeah, it sounds like they're doing the research right now. And then they've got to go through their notes, and then there's going to be a whole bunch more argument. And here's what I'm going to do. If you're watching back on the replay, I will timestamp when this actually starts so you can fast forward through all of the wait time. Otherwise, we're going to just sit here. We're going to grab our cup of coffee and just let me bring in the extra camera so you can see what I've been doing. I won't be having their extra camera during the live feed. But here it is. So last night, I had to completely replace a section that I had put the wrong drills on. So I had to take them all up, put the right ones down. Very annoying. All right, I'm going to go grab my coffee. Be right back. All right, I've got my coffee. Did you guys get yours? Look, I've got my my gnome cup. There he is. She, he, she. I don't know. So it's supposed to be a cross stitch weekend, but you know, I'm a gamer. If you didn't know, I'm amongst all the other things, I'm a gamer. And how's the crochet blanket coming along? Oh, we'll talk about that too. So this weekend is free to play Diablo 4, which comes out. I don't know when it comes out, in a couple of weeks. Wow, I love Diablo. So I'm going to try it out this weekend. I'm going to play it. I'm going to download it and download it. I wonder if I have to download it now. Ooh, that's a good question. So the blanket is coming along great. I've gotten January, February, and March is done. I don't know if you saw March, Kim. AM Coffee Girl, welcome. Nice to have you. So let me show you March. March. And I bought the yarn for April and May. And in April and May, there's two different patterns for April and for May, both a male and a female gnome. So I'm going to do them both because I want this to be a really big blanket, and I'm finding it incredibly fun and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and do both. Whenever there's an alternate gnome, I'm going to try to do both. Oh gosh, let me see. So this is the January gnome. You guys have probably seen that one. This is the February. And this is March. So we're good for the month. Of course, the month is almost over, but yes, I've got the yarn. I'm ready to start the March gnome, the April gnomes. Good morning. Good morning, AM Coffee Girl. Good morning, Lisa, AK Rose. I know it's too early, but I got my coffee in the cup that you gave me. Thank you, AK Rose. She's the one that gifted this to me. I absolutely love it. I think it was a birthday present or a Christmas present. I forget. But I love it. You like March, huh, Kim? The colors are unique. I will say that. Green has never been my favorite color, but I think it turned out pretty cool. And I don't know what February, or no, April, May, June. Hold on. What did I do with that? Oh, be right back. So here's what the April gnome will look like. That's the female. This is the male version. I'm going to do both of them. And then May, here's the female for May. Oh, no, wait a minute. Hold on. That's the female. Huh. Oh, there were two versions of female gnomes. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to do both of them, but I could. They're different. They're both for May. I thought one was a male and one was a female, but they're both female. Whatever. They're different, so I probably will do the yarn for it. So why not? It's a fun project. I really appreciate you bring that to my attention, Kim. I'm having fun with it. But I'm supposed to be cross-stitching this week. I don't think that's going to happen because I'm going to be playing that game. In fact, I'm going to turn on the Xbox so I can download the game while this is going on. Good morning, Lois. So if you're just joining us, here's what's happening. There was a debate this morning about a juror who said she could not stay past 5:30. The plan that the judge and the attorneys had was that they do the closings, get done early, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen now because they're all milling about doing research. And then give this to the jury and let them debate for as long as they want to tonight and then come back tomorrow or Monday. So they haven't even polled the jury to see if they're available on Monday because when they picked the jury, they had told the jury it was just going to be a 3-week trial. And now it looks like it may go into a 4th week, depending. I don't think this is going to be quick deliberations. I think there's going to be a lot of debate back and forth. On the first trial, there was 10 people that said not guilty, 2 that said guilty, and the debate went on for a little while before they came back and said they couldn't make a decision, and it ended up a hung jury and a mistrial. So I don't want that to happen here, but if this jury happens to be not available next week for some reason, the judge may have to declare a mistrial just because of the unavailability of the jury. Oh my gosh. And part of the fault is because every single morning they have to have a freaking debate about some issue or another. Yeah. It's weird. Open beta, download now and play on March 24th. Is that today? Is today March 24th? It is March 24th. Okay. So I'm get it for free. I am doing that free. That way I'll know if I like it or not, and before I decide if I want to purchase. Okay. So it is installing. Oh, how cool. It's only 34 gigabytes. It'll take a hot minute for that to install. They're still on the seal. What they're doing now is they're researching precedent for the judge, because the judge clearly he wants to dismiss this juror and just go with an alternate. I wish he'd done that earlier. But you know what? It's Friday, right? Should we do the Friday dance? Uh-oh, hold on. We're gonna lose people here. Go to, let's see, we got to get music. We need music for this. Oh, here, dance pop. Ready? Here we go. It's pop. Is it? There we go. Out of your chairs, everybody. It's too early, right? Okay. No twerking. No twerking. Okay. How many people did I just lose? They're like, what is she doing? She's crazy. We got to go to a different channel. That's okay. What you see is what you get. Why is it so dark this morning? I think there's like an 80% chance of rain. Thank you, Lois. Lisa's going to wiggle in bed. Okay. AM girls dancing in the chat. Woohoo. I'm so excited for this game, guys. I just, I'll give up my cross stitch weekend for the game. Yep. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you. I think the same game will be on Switch. I think you can order it. I don't know if it's free to play on Switch this weekend. If it is, you guys should check it out if you have a Switch. I'm going to do it on the Xbox. But my understanding is on all consoles open for the weekend. It's raining in Maryland and the sky's dark. Yeah, it's here too. Very, very overcast. And no, I didn't walk the dogs this morning. I didn't have time. It's okay. So my son went out of town for the weekend. He and his wife headed over to Kansas City. They're going to one of the March Madness basketball games tonight that's over there. University of Miami is playing, and that's my son's absolute favorite basketball team. So he was so tickled to get those tickets. So long story to tell you that I got to go over and check on the grandkids. Now, 2 of them are already adults, so there's no, whatever they do is whatever they do, because, I don't even have money to bail them out if that's what I need to do tonight. And then my granddaughter, the 15-year-old, God knows what she's up to, but I got to go over and make sure, the house hasn't burned down, that kind of thing. I told my son, I'll bring Malia over here for the weekend. But he's like, no, I need somebody reliable to feed the animals, feed the dogs. So I understood. So I am supposed to be live tonight with Mickey Sunshine Creates. If I have to do it mobile, I'll do it mobile, but I'll be live in her chat or in her live tonight. So it'll be simulcast on my channel. So you don't have to find her channel to see me live. It'll be live on this channel as well. Because we know how to do it now. Yay. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Are they really going to make us wait while they do research? Oh, for God's sakes. I told you guys last night, it's always something. They never start on time. And the jury's probably back there sitting there wondering, why did we have to get here at 8:30 and they're not starting? Of course. This coffee's missing something. I don't know. It doesn't taste right this morning. Maybe more creamer. Hold on. Bailey's. Oh my God, Lisa, that's a great idea. Yeah, that would be delicious. It's much better now. It just needed a smidge more creamer. Okay, we're waiting. Rawhide. I guess it's never too early to start drinking. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Almost where, well, I don't know. Where would it be 5 o'clock in the world? I have no idea. If you are new to the channel and you're wondering why people are in green, their names are in green because they are members of the channel. Thank you guys so much for your support. I do appreciate it. There's Carl. Please don't say, have I been singing? I apologize. Carl, guess what I'm doing? I'm downloading Diablo 4. The open beta is on Xbox. Free to play starting today. So it's downloading 34 gigs. Be there or be square. Yeah. It's 5 a.m. here, but the song doesn't specify. Oh, yeah. I just says 5 o'clock somewhere. I don't have any Baileys in the house. Isn't that terrible? I know. I need some. Carl, you missed the Friday dance unless you were I was singing Rawhide. No. I'm just one of these type people that break out in song. It drives my sister crazy. I walk around the house singing. Yeah. So last night I started watching a new series on Netflix called Night Agent. Oh, really good show. Yeah. So out, guys. It's a good series. It's about this FBI agent who he's accused of participating in a bombing, but they know that he didn't participate, but because he's not in favor with the public, they're kind of giving him a job off the grid. It's really interesting. Oh no, Lisa, my brother would he would real quick if I started that. Carl said, Lisa, no. And now it's in my head. It wants to come out of my mouth so bad. I could mute and then sing it just to get it out. Okay, I got it out of my system, I hope. Waddle, waddle. Okay, I want to sing the whole song. Oh, that's like my favorite song ever. That you can just break out in song with. Robin and Carl are saying no. You knew it would get in my head. Oh, geez. I'm going to be singing it all day long. Waddle, waddle, waddle. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to drive new people away. But I get goofy on this channel. We are waiting. Okay, we're back in the courtroom. Yay! I don't know if the judge is in the courtroom. Let's take a look. Okay, the woman in the tank top there is the mother of the victims, Juan and Sergio Guitron. That's mom and dad right there. It's got to be tough for them, really tough.
Did Jocelyn say she was sending me something? Oh, she's reading those two cases? Do we need Miss Hodges? It was Miss Hodges who sent me some case law.
Judge, I read it as well.
Okay, so we ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge. I just sent one additional case today.
Okay, I haven't gotten it. Is it sent directly to me or is
Yes,
I see it? Oh, do I have two from you? Rodriguez?
And Douglas.
Okay.
From defense.
One of them is a duplicate of the defense case. They sent me Kavanaugh and Williams. You sent me Rodriguez and...
Defense sent Rodriguez and Douglas. State sent Williams and
Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh.
Yep. All right. I just received the defense cases. I'm going to pull them up, and what I might let you do is, well, I suspect the state needs an opportunity. Have you received the defense cases?
Yeah, Judge, I'm reading it right now.
All right.
Yes.
I'm pulling them up. I've got one up. Please. Thank you. Be right back.
Did the judge hear me singing the duck song? He ran out of the courtroom when I started singing it to myself. What? Come back. Oh my God. Oh, it's going to be a long day. Lisa. Yes, it's in my head. Oh, for heaven's sake. Look at all those notebooks. Oh my God. Were they prepared or what? Carl, if you ever get into trouble in Florida, there's the lawyers for you. Those are the ones you want to hire. Probably can't afford it though. I'm sure they're not cheap. I don't know who all these other people are. Maybe relatives, maybe people who just like to watch trials. But there's mom and dad right there. The deputies are on their phones. They're playing what's the latest game on the phones? I don't know. Candy Crush or something. Dan Newland. What does that mean, Carl? Dan Newland. Is that somebody you know, Dan Newland? Look at those. Oh my God. I wouldn't want to be the paralegal that has to haul those things in every day. Oh, they got little carts there. Look at that. Oh, that brings back memories. Boxes, boxes and boxes and boxes hauled in, because you can't leave that stuff in. Well, they might be letting them leave it there and just locking the courtroom at night. Well, they lock the courtroom anyway, but I suspect they're letting them just leave that stuff there. Lawyer. Okay. Is that the name of this lawyer? Did I not even know that? Oh my gosh, that's terrible. He is a pit bull. Oh yeah. And then if you get in trouble up north, like Michigan, you want to hire, what's her name? Diane Manasseh. Oh man, is she good? Talk about a pit bull. She's really good. I've seen her twice live, and both defendants got not guilties. Carl, don't get me started on the Muppets, because you guys are trying to put these earworms in my head. Lisa, stop. Oh God, you're funny. All right, we're at 23 gigs out of 34 gigabytes. I should stream this. But as soon as I pull the game up, the judge will come out. I feel like it's really dark today. I don't know why. There's Max. Hi, Max. Oh, I'm on the big television. No. Okay, we're not going back to the seal. No. No, seal. Stop. Oh, we're back to the seal. Okay. Why did he have us come here at 8:30 if he's making us wait? Dadgummit. Okay, stop. Lisa, this is all your fault. I can't get it out of my head. Oh, geez. Okay, and we're waiting. If you are just joining us, what we are waiting for is everyone is doing research on whether the judge should dismiss one of the jurors because they can't stay past 5:30. And the judge's plan was to get this all to the jury by early afternoon. Carl says, "Oh, I can download it in the Xbox app. I don't have to wait." Right. You can go in all weekend free. Open beta. Ooh, yep. By the way, my back is feeling a lot better. Yeah. It still bothers me towards the stop it, Lisa. Bothers me towards the end of the day. Yeah. Oh, good, Carl. Cool. Yep. I want to download it on the bedroom Xbox too. So I can play in there. Because that way I can put heat on my back in the bedroom. Oh, who am I kidding? It's because I'm lazy. I like to lay in bed and play games. So I'm watching the feed. As soon as the judge comes in, we will go back. Now, what almost an hour. I could have slept an additional hour. Hi, Cynthia. Welcome. Yeah, so this juror said she can't stay past 5:30. The judge's plan was to get this to the jury to start deliberations by early afternoon and have them deliberate for as long as they want tonight and then come back tomorrow. So she says she's not available. She has no one else to pick up her children. And she even tell them that she says, I've got the car seats in the car if you want to go check. And I mean, I believe her, but plus they haven't cleared with the jury whether they're any or all available next week. You know, some of them may have travel plans, you know, who knows? But he has not asked them yet if they're available next week. When they picked this jury, they picked it, you know, with the idea that they would be done in 3 weeks, and that just didn't happen, you know, but they would be done and over with by today. I think even one of the state attorneys is not available next week. So the judge has said there's a possibility he might declare a mistrial if these jurors aren't available next week. And I don't think it's going to be a quick deliberation. I think there's a lot of stuff to debate in this case about his innocence, about what, you know, I don't know. I just don't think the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that this guy was the murderer. I've got a lot of doubt. What you missed yesterday, what I didn't cover, you know, I'm not doing a recap of yesterday, but yesterday was the orthopedic surgeon that has looked at all of the medical records and examined him and said that he has partial right hand paralysis and probably wouldn't have been able to shoot a gun. We know that what they weren't able to ask him is, you know, what if he modifies the gun? All right, the judge is on the stand.
Ms. Luna, did you send some additional cases, or
I only sent
the two?
cases.
Okay. All right. Has the position of the defense changed?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And the state?
Judge, we did find that Kavanaugh case that talks about specifically if a juror has a conflict that arises during the first weekend of deliberations, that was considered appropriate for the judge to replace that person with an alternate. So Judge, I mean, I do have concerns. I know defense, I guess they don't have concerns about if we go beyond the weekend, about the rest of the jurors. I have taken a look at the defense cases that they have presented as well. It looks like they're asking, some of them suggest talking to the jurors a little bit more.
I am going to talk to the juror. I'm going to talk to her. The first thing I'm going to do is bring her in. I don't know that it's still a problem, to be honest with you. So obviously, I think that's the first bridge we have to cross. But if it still is a problem, then there's some additional questions that I want to ask her.
Okay. And Judge, I know Ms. Johnson, and I don't have my notes with me from jury selection. Ms. Johnson had hers, and she was tracking the conflicts, and she did not see where we were notified specifically for that juror of any sort of.
We don't either. I'll ask the defense if you disagree with that we were aware of her 5:30 limitation prior to the selection.
So what I would say is, having done the jury selection, I remember you talking about scheduling, that we start at 8:30, like try to get you out at 5 or before 5, maybe just a little bit. Nothing specific was talked about. I don't believe at any point.
Did I not at that time say though, except for deliberations? Because I always give that caveat when I say we finish at 5. I always say
cannot-
except for deliberations.
I cannot answer that definitively, but you saying that does spark something in my head, because I think I have a memory of that I don't feel comfortable saying yay or nay. But I don't recall anything specifically about scheduling.
Okay.
Being discussed by the state or the defense in questioning.
But do you remember her, other than you remembering my statement to them regarding stopping at 5 or 5:30 every day, trying to stop at 5 or 5:30 a day?
Right.
Do you remember her raising her child pickup issue?
I don't remember her raising her hand or saying anything about the child care issue. My recall is that if and when that came up, I think it was around the time where you said, hey, we're going to go a little bit later in the trial.
Yeah, during the trial when that came up. She didn't raise it until like after the second or third day of trial.
It did not, I would agree that it did not come up until whenever you addressed the issue that we're going to go a little bit later. That's when she affirmatively raised that.
All right. Anything else from the defense?
Your Honor, if I can just start. I mean, I do agree that we need to just have some more questions answered. But if and then are we gonna have an opportunity after to discuss?
Well, I'm not going to make a decision in front of her. I'm going to have to excuse her. So certainly.
Right, I just don't want to go through my arguments on the case law before you, and I think it's.
I
appropriate
agree.
to wait.
It may be moot. I may call her out and she say, and then we've wasted all this, not wasted,
Exactly.
but so I want to get her out here. I want to ask her that. And I have a couple of other questions I want to ask her. I want to ask her if she says she has not made other arrangements. I want to ask her if there's still anything else she can do. If I can accommodate her in any way by breaking at 5:30, letting her go pick up her children, bring them here and being comfortable with them staying in the courtroom or in one of the offices watching a TV, and we'll provide them pizza. But if she agrees to that, I then want to inquire further that will not have an impact on her ability to pay attention and to continue deliberations and respect the views of her, the other jurors. Because I don't want her in a situation where now she's compromising her position because she knows her kids are sitting in the courtroom or in an office watching a TV. You recognize that could be a problem too, where we try to accommodate her, but even those accommodations have an effect on her ability to deliberate and not be distracted during her deliberations. We don't want that, right, Mr. Escobar?
Judge, we don't want any juror to be distracted, but what we do want is we want to make sure that when my client has participated.
I understand, but you recognize that it very well may be a distraction if she's back there and her children are running around the courthouse.
Judge, I realize that, but my suggestion would have been, let's do closings, and then let's find out after we do closings what all of these jurors, are going to anticipate as to the future of their deliberations.
So eliminate then the possibility of using an alternate who is qualified. The issue here is
you don't have to excuse an alternate until we make our decision. We can have our closings, and then we can make whatever arguments or whatever inquiries we want to make after closings, and then decisions can be made.
So we delay deliberations. We send all 15 of them or 14 of them back and say, don't start deliberating because we've got some things to decide
it's probably
here.
going to be lunch anyway.
But it's going to be well past lunch. If you take 2 hours in your closings, it's past 9 o'clock. It's 9:30.
Exactly. So that's why
It's going to be 4 o'clock before you finish your closings.
Well, not 4 o'clock, but certainly, after lunch.
I'm going to bring her out, ask her those questions. I may not make decisions. You're right, we're ultimately going to have to take a lunch break clearly in the middle of closings. So I'll give you that we may have an opportunity before the closings are finished to further argue the law or do additional research. But I want to get up front so that if there's any accommodations that I intend to make for her we can start doing that. So I'm going to bring her in. I'm not going to mention her by name. I'm going to call her number 12, and let's bring her out.
Ready, Judge?
We are.
All right, jurors.
Go ahead and have a seat wherever you're comfortable. You don't have to sit in your regular chair. If you want to, you can. All right, juror is seated. Everyone else may be seated this time. First of all, let me apologize to you bringing you out individually. I in no means intend to embarrass you or anything like that. I'm also, because of the camera's not going to use your name, I'm simply going to use your number. You are juror number 12 on our panel. So for the record, it is juror number 12 who is present, and I have some questions of you based on some things that you've indicated during the trial, and more specifically yesterday when I instructed the jury that since there was no time limit on deliberations and that everyone should be prepared to go late tonight, it's my understanding that while you were leaving, you instructed one of the deputies that you still had the 5:30 issue. Is that correct?
I do.
And does that remain as you sit here today?
It does.
All right. So there is absolute 5:30. There is no one else that can pick up your children. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you mind me asking how old your children are?
1 and 2.
Okay.
So the car seats. So I do have somewhere that where they'll babysit them, but I don't have somebody that has car seats that can go pick both of them up.
So let me ask you this, because that was my next inquiry was going to be if there's some accommodation that I can make to you that would allow you to continue to deliberate tonight if it became necessary. We have no idea whether it's to become necessary or not.
Sure.
But, for example, if I was to say, and the jury was still deliberating at 5:30, we will take a break at 5:30. Let me ask you this. How long do you think it would take to go pick up your children, take them to where they're being babysat by someone who you are comfortable with, and get back to the courthouse?
An hour.
An hour. Okay. So if we were to break from 5:30 to 6:30, do you believe that that would be an accommodation that would satisfy you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. During that time, I suspect that the jury is going to begin deliberations well before 5:30. Will the fact that you have to go and pick up your children and take them to some third party to babysit in any way affect your ability to deliberate? And by that I mean, will you be distracted at all, worrying about, is the judge going to remember to let me go at 5:30? Worried about that. Would that distract you?
No.
Now, after you were to return at 6:30 or shortly thereafter,
Yeah.
the fact that your children of the ages 1 and 2 are being babysat by someone else, would that in any way be a concern to you that you would be distracted from your deliberations?
No, I have trustworthy people.
Excellent, excellent. Let me just ask you while you're here, and again, this is all, I guess, speculation, something that I don't always necessarily allow witnesses to do. But assuming the possibility that it was to go late, and I will let you know that my position will be up to the group as a whole, whether there's some point tonight, if you have not reached the verdict, if you want to go home and come back and continue deliberations either on Saturday or Monday. But is there an ultimate time tonight that you would be uncomfortable allowing this third party to babysit with your children?
No.
You're willing to come back, but you can't go past 10.
No, it's fine.
Okay, all right. Let me just ask you this. Is there a way that this third party, if I allow you time but less than an hour, can the car seats be transferred and they can pick up the children? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just inquiring as to other alternatives. Is that even a possibility? If it's not, it's fine.
They're in Riverview, so it takes me at least 20 minutes to get to where the daycare is, and then another 10. I would almost take an hour to do anything, even if I would like run the car seats to the person,
Okay.
it would take almost an hour.
There's no way the person could come here and I could allow you a break to go down and meet at your car, and transfer the car seats into their car, which would be a shorter break for you?
She won't drive on the interstate.
Okay, not a problem, not a problem. All right, I had to ask.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable with those answers, juror number 12, so I'm gonna send you back. Please not discuss anything about this with anyone else in the jury room, but thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, juror has exited. Let's do this. Let's continue. Let's bring out the entire group, and I'll start with instructions, and we'll start closing arguments. We're going to order lunch to be here at approximately between 11:30 and 12, and we're just going to take a break. I mean, if it's almost the end of the defense, I won't cut you off. I don't mind going a little bit later, but then we'll take a break in between the defense, the end of the defense closing and the state's rebuttal to allow them to eat and us to determine. But I will tell you that I'm inclined to accommodate the juror. So you all know what my starting point is for any future argument or case law that you want to present. It sounds like we can accommodate this juror who is a member of the regular panel by taking a 1 hour break between 5:30 and 6:30 if necessary. So that's my inclination. I haven't made up my mind, and I'm going to allow both sides the opportunity to be heard. And certainly if you all agree, then that makes it a lot easier. I'm not suggesting that you agree, but I'll give you the opportunity to be heard during the lunch break. But right now, what I think we're going to do is we're going to bring them in. I'm going to instruct them on the law, and I'm going to allow you to begin the closing arguments. Before we do that, though, I need a final thumbs up as to pages 1 through 15 of the instructions and the multi-page verdict that I have in my hand. Mr. Grant, were you able to review, and were all of the changes that we discussed, some of which you requested yesterday, made to the jury instructions?
I have reviewed the verdict form. It is in the form that we agreed. I note that there were some, it looks like some grammatical changes for presentation that make it look better, and they're good. The only thing I wanted to double check is where we placed the translator or the interpreter.
Should have been right after.
1-2, which was right after weighing the evidence. It's where it should be right before 3.9C, the identification. So that being said, yes, I have reviewed them, and they do comport with our charge conference from yesterday.
Excellent. Did the state need to be heard at all regarding the final proposed instructions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then my plan is I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to read them pages 1 through 15. Well, 1 through 14, I apologize. 15 will be read after the closing arguments are completed. I will also read them every bit of the verdict form at the appropriate time within the instructions. I will also let them know they're welcome to take notes if they wish, but that these instructions, along with the verdict form, will be in the jury room with them when they are deliberating.
The only thing on that, I think we talked about this yesterday, that sometimes people take notes and they go a little too slow, too fast, but.
Well, no, that was if we give
we're
them,
following the-
I don't give them one to read along with me.
Right. No, I know. Sometimes when people take notes, they fall behind, but it is what it is.
Well, I've never told them they can't take notes during, I'm going to tell them that they're going to have these and they don't need to take notes, but I'm not going to tell them they can't.
That's why I want to make sure that sometimes people think they have to in their mind.
I will let them know. That's why I tell them these instructions will be with them in the room. I'll tell them they don't have to take notes. They don't have to write everything down because they're going to have them with them.
Right.
Mr. Escobar?
The only thing that I would ask is when I get ready to do my closing arguments, we are going to have to move some equipment.
Not a problem.
We can just have a little bit.
Absolutely. Have I ever denied you that?
You haven't. You've been wonderful.
Note that I've been wonderful. Put a little star next to that. Thank you. Anything from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Let's get the jury.
While they're doing that, I'll confirm with Michael Keeley, the last instruction you're going to read.
I'm going to go refill the coffee. Be right back.
Submitting the case to the jury. Everything else is what will be read.
Right. Mr. Keatley, I usually ask this. I haven't asked you at all during this trial, but just in abundance of caution, I'm going to ask you: are you satisfied with the services of your attorneys?
Absolutely.
That's no surprise. I intend to get a plaque that says "I'm wonderful" and put it somewhere.
And I'll sign it.
I don't know if that'd be appropriate, but
But I mean that sincerely. We all have arguments, but they're part of the profession, right? That's something interesting. I didn't know.
What's that? The gavel works.
Yeah, I heard you.
it's only the second time that I've had to use it in
And I
17
think I was
years.
at fault, and poor John got the brunt of it, right?
He did. He did. But let's try to ensure that I won't have to use it for a third time in my career before this trial is over. Ah, so we are waiting for them. They are not waiting for us, for the record. All the audio equipment is up and working, other than having to switch over after the state's first closing.
I think it's underneath here. Yeah, I think it was stuck over here. Oh, see, it's like it's not much tension.
Oh, yeah, I need that connected, so you can move it back.
Are you gonna use the Elmo at all?
What? Not at the moment,
Okay. 'Cause
but
I can.
that's my laptop.
Right. I was making sure you had enough tension.
Okay, just don't get it. Somebody will trip it.
Did that create a hole that they might fall in?
What, sir?
Did that create a hole in the middle?
There is a hole.
for them falling.
I know sometimes they've moved it and then we had to block a hole so that the attorney during closing didn't trip during
I
closing.
think Michelle and I have flat, so we're okay. I didn't wear my high heel thing.
I know.
I don't remember who the attorney was. I'm sure there is an attorney who's tripped.
Somebody will follow to be me.
It's a liability. Jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning and welcome back. It's great to see all of your smiling faces again here with us today. The first thing that I need to do, as always, just to make sure, is ask by show of hands whether any of you have discussed anything about this case, either amongst yourselves or with anyone else, or if any of you were exposed to anything about this case between the time you left the courtroom yesterday and the time that you have returned this morning, by show of hands. Excellent. Let the record reflect that there are no hands. Now, ladies and gentlemen, well, first of all, let me apologize for the late start. I know I had you here at 8:30 this morning, and it's now a little after 9:30 that we're getting started. I take full responsibility for any delays. There were some things that I had to take up with the attorneys, some things regarding the instructions that I'm going to give you in a few moments. So I do take full responsibility for those delays. You may recall yesterday, though, that both sides had rested their case, and I told you that you would come back this morning. I would read you the instructions on the law, and then you would hear the final arguments of the attorneys, and that is exactly what is about to take place. I am going to read you the instructions because every word of them are important. I do want to let you know at this time, though, that this exact copy of the instructions will go back into the jury room with you, so you will have access. You will have the instructions with you while you are deliberating. Just wanted to let you know that, so it's certainly not necessary to try to write down all of the instructions as you hear me reading them to you. I will turn on my microphone in a moment so that I don't have to shout while I'm reading all of the instructions. But we're going to go ahead now, and we're going to proceed with that, and then the attorneys will present their final arguments, and then there will be one short final instruction that I will give you between the time you go back and deliberate. I do anticipate that we will have a lunch break before all of the closing arguments are done. So I don't want you to be concerned or looking at the clock and thinking, oh my gosh, he's not going to feed us today. We've made arrangements, so we may take a short break in the middle of the closing arguments in order to allow you to go back into the jury room and have some lunch. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start the instructions at this time. Members of the jury, I thank you for your attention during this trial. Please pay attention to the instructions that I am about to give you. Michael Keeley, the defendant in this case, has been accused of the crimes of murder in the first degree, 2 counts, and attempted murder in the first degree, 4 counts. This next instruction applies to counts 1 and 2, and in count 1, the victim is Sergio Guitron, and in count 2, the victim is Juan Guitron. In this case, Michael Keeley is accused of murder in the first degree. Murder in the first degree includes the lesser crimes of murder in the second degree and manslaughter, all of which are unlawful. A killing that is excusable or was committed by the use of justifiable deadly force is lawful. If you find the victim was killed by Michael Keeley, you will then consider the circumstances surrounding the killing in deciding if the killing was murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, or manslaughter, or whether the killing was excusable or resulted from justifiable use of deadly force. The killing of a human being is justifiable homicide and lawful if necessarily done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, or to commit a felony in any dwelling house in which the defendant was at the time of the killing. The killing of a human being is excusable and therefore lawful under any one of the following 3 circumstances. Number 1, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune, in doing any lawful act by lawful means with usual ordinary caution and without any unlawful intent. Or 2, when the killing occurs by accident and misfortune in the heat of passion upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. Or 3, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune resulting from a sudden combat if a dangerous weapon is not used and the killing is not done in a cruel or unusual manner. Dangerous weapon is any weapon that, taking into account the manner in which it is used, is likely to produce death or great bodily harm. I will now instruct you on the circumstances that must be proved before Michael Keeley may be found guilty of murder in the first degree or any lesser included crime. And this first instruction here applies to counts 1 and 2, And again, the victim in count 1 is Sergio Guitron, and the victim in count 2 is Juan Guitron. To prove the crime of first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following 3 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, the victim is dead. Number 2, the death was caused by the criminal act of Michael Keatley. Number 3, there was a premeditated killing of the victim. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. The question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you from the evidence. It will be sufficient proof of premeditation if the circumstances of the killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. In considering the evidence, you should consider the possibility that although the evidence may not convince you that the defendant committed the main crimes of which he is accused, there may be evidence that he committed other acts that would be lesser included crimes. Therefore, if you decide that the main accusation has not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, you will next need to decide if the defendant is guilty of any lesser included crime. The lesser crimes indicated in the definition of first-degree murder in counts 1 and 2 are second-degree murder and manslaughter. The lesser crimes indicated in the definition of attempted first-degree murder in counts 3, 4, 5, and 6 are attempted second-degree murder and attempted manslaughter by act. This next instruction applies to counts 1 and 2. It is the lesser included offense, and the victim in count 1 is Sergio Guitron, and the victim in count 2 is Juan Guitron. To prove the crime of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following 3 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, the victim is dead. Number 2, the death was caused by the criminal act of Michael Keatley. Number 3, there was an unlawful killing of the victim by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrated a depraved mind without regard for human life. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrates a depraved mind if it is an act or series of acts that 1, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and 2, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and 3, is of such nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. In order to convict of second degree, it's not necessary for the state to prove the defendant had an intent to cause death. This next instruction applies to counts 1 and 2, and it is a lesser included offense. The victim in count 1 is Sergio Guitron. The victim in count 2 is Juan Guitron. To prove the crime of manslaughter, the state must prove the following 2 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, the victim is dead. Number 2, A, Michael Keatley intentionally committed an act or acts that caused the death of the victim, or B, the death of the victim was caused by the culpable negligence of Michael Keatley. Every person has a duty to act reasonably towards others. If there is a violation of that duty without any conscious intention to harm, that violation is negligence. The defendant cannot be guilty of manslaughter by committing a merely negligent act, or if the killing was either justifiable or excusable homicide, as I have previously instructed you. In order to convict of manslaughter by act, it is not necessary for the state to prove that the defendant had an intent to cause death, only an intent to commit an act that was not merely negligent, justified, or excusable, and which caused death. I will now define culpable negligence for you. Each of us has a duty to act reasonably towards others. If there is a violation of that duty without any conscious intention to harm, that violation is negligence. But culpable negligence is more than a failure to use ordinary care towards others. In order for negligence to be culpable, it must be gross and flagrant. Culpable negligence is a course of conduct showing reckless disregard of human life or of the safety of persons exposed to its dangerous effects, or such an entire want of care as to raise a presumption of a conscious indifference to consequences, or which shows wantonness or reckless or a grossly careless disregard for the safety and welfare of the public, or such an indifference to the rights of others as is equivalent to an intentional violation of such rights. The negligent act or omission must have been committed with an utter disregard for the safety of others. Culpable negligence is consciously doing an act or following a course of conduct that the defendant must have known or reasonably should have known was likely to cause death or great bodily injury. This next instruction applies to counts 3, 4, 5, and 6. The victim in count 3 is Gonzalo Guevara. The victim in count 4 is Daniel Beltran. The victim in count 5 is Richard Cantu. The victim in count 6 is Ramon Galan. In this case, Michael Keeley is accused of attempted murder in the first degree. Attempted murder in the first degree includes the lesser crimes of attempted murder in the second degree and attempted manslaughter by act, all of which are forms of attempted homicide and all of which are unlawful. An attempted homicide that is excusable or was committed by the use of justifiable deadly force is lawful. If you find that there was an attempted homicide of the victim by Michael Keeley, you will then consider the circumstances surrounding the attempted homicide in deciding whether it was attempted first-degree murder or attempted second-degree murder or attempted manslaughter by act, or whether the attempted homicide was excusable or resulted from justifiable use of deadly force. An attempted homicide is justifiable and lawful if necessarily done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, or to commit a felony in any dwelling house in which the defendant was at the time of the attempted homicide. An attempted homicide is excusable and therefore lawful under any one of the three following circumstances. Number one, when the attempted homicide is committed by accident and misfortune in doing any lawful act by lawful means with usual ordinary caution and without any unlawful intent. Or two, when the attempted homicide occurs by accident and misfortune in the heat of passion upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. Or three, when the attempted homicide is committed by accident and misfortune resulting from a sudden combat if a dangerous weapon is not used and the attempted killing is not done in a cruel and unusual manner. Dangerous weapon is any weapon that, taking into account the manner in which it is used, is likely to produce death or great bodily harm. I now instruct you on the circumstances that must be proved before the defendant may be found guilty of attempted first-degree murder or attempted second-degree murder or attempted manslaughter by act. This next instruction applies to counts 3, 4, and 5. Again, the victim in count 3 is Gonzalo Guevara. The victim in count 4 is Daniel Beltran. The victim in count 5 is Richard Cantu. And the victim in count 6 is Ramon Galan. To prove the crime of attempted first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number one, Michael Keeley did some act intended to cause the death of the victim that went beyond just thinking or talking about it. Number two, Michael Keeley acted with a premeditated design to kill the victim. Number three, the act would have resulted in the death of the victim except that someone prevented Michael Keeley from killing the victim or he failed to do so. A premeditated design to kill means that there was a conscious decision to kill. The decision must be present in the mind at the time the act was committed. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the act. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the act was committed. The question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you from the evidence. It will be sufficient proof of premeditation if the circumstances of the attempted killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the attempted killing. This next instruction applies to counts 3, 4, and 5 as lesser included offenses. The victim in count 3 is Gonzalo Guerrera. The victim in count 4 is Daniel Beltran. The victim in count 5 is Richard Cantu. And the victim in count 6 is Ramon Galan. To prove the crimes of attempted second-degree murder, the state must prove the following 2 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, Michael Keatley intentionally committed an act which would have resulted in the death of the victim, except that someone prevented Michael Keatley from killing the victim, or he failed to do so. Number 2, the act was imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind if it is an act or series of acts that 1, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and 2, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and 3, is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. In order to convict the defendant of attempted second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendant had an intent to cause death. This next instruction applies to counts 3, 4, 5, and 6 as lesser included offense. The victim in count 3 is Gonzalo Guevara. The victim in count 4 is Daniel Beltran. The victim in count 5 is Richard Cantu. And the victim in count 6 is Ramon Galan. To prove the crime of attempted manslaughter by act, the state must prove the following element beyond a reasonable doubt. Michael Keatley intentionally committed an act which would have resulted in the death of the victim, except that someone prevented Michael Keatley from killing the victim, or he failed to do so. However, the defendant cannot be guilty of attempted manslaughter by act by committing a merely negligent act. Every person has a duty to act reasonably and use ordinary care towards others. If there is a violation of that duty without any conscious intention to harm, that violation is negligence. In order to convict of attempted manslaughter by act, it is not necessary for the state to prove that the defendant had an intent to cause death, only an intent to commit an act which would have caused death and was not justifiable or excusable attempted homicide, as I have previously instructed you. This next applies to the offense of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and attempted, let me start that over, I apologize. This next instruction applies to the offenses of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and attempted second-degree murder. If you find that Michael Keatley committed first-degree murder, second-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, or attempted second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he personally carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a firearm, you should select yes in the special finding form. A firearm is legally defined as, and that'll become, I'm going to read you the verdict form in just a moment, and that'll become clear at that point. A firearm is legally defined as any weapon which is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, the frame or receiver of any such weapon, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer, any destructive device, or any machine gun. The term firearm does not include an antique firearm unless the antique firearm is used in the commission of a crime. If you find that Michael Keatley committed first-degree murder, second-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, or attempted second-degree murder, but you are not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he personally carried, displayed, threatened to use, or attempted to use a firearm, then you should select no in the special finding form. This next instruction applies only to the lesser included offense of manslaughter or attempted manslaughter by act. If you find that Michael Keatley committed manslaughter, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he personally carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon, you should select yes in the special finding form. A weapon is legally defined to mean any object that could be used to cause death or inflict serious bodily harm. If you find that Michael Keatley committed manslaughter, but you are not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he personally carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon, then you should select no in the special finding form. This next offense applies to offenses of first-degree murder and second-degree murder. It applies to counts 1 and 2, and the victim in count 1 is Sergio Guitron, and the victim in count 2 is Juan Guitron. If you find that Michael Keatley committed first-degree murder or second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he discharged a firearm and in doing so caused the death of the victim, you should select yes in the special finding form. If you find that Michael Keatley committed first-degree murder or second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he discharged a firearm, you should select yes in the special finding form. If you find that Michael Keatley committed first-degree murder or second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he actually possessed a firearm, you should select yes in the special finding form. A firearm is legally defined as any weapon which is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. The frame or receiver of any such weapon, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer, any destructive device, or any machine gun. The term firearm does not include an antique firearm unless the antique firearm is used in the commission of a crime. To actually possess a firearm means that the defendant, A, carried a firearm on his person, or excuse me, B, had a firearm within immediate physical reach with ready access with the intent to use the firearm during the commission of the crime. This next instruction applies to offenses of attempted first-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. It applies to counts 3, 4, 5, and 6. The victim in count 3 is Gonzalo Guevara. The victim in count 4 is Daniel Beltran. The victim in count 5 is Richard Cantu. The victim in count 6 is Ramon Galan. If you find that Michael Keatley committed attempted first-degree murder or attempted second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he discharged a firearm and in doing so caused great bodily harm to the victim, you should select yes in the special finding forms. Great bodily harm means great as distinguished from slight, trivial, minor, or moderate harm, and as such does not include mere bruises. If you find that Michael Keatley committed attempted first-degree murder or attempted second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he discharged a firearm, you should select yes in the special finding forms. If you find that Michael Keatley committed attempted first-degree murder or attempted second-degree murder, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he actually possessed a firearm, you should select yes in the special findings form. A firearm is legally defined as any weapon, including a starter gun, which is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. The frame or receiver of any such weapon, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer, any destructive device, or any machine gun. The term firearm does not include an antique firearm unless the antique firearm is used in the commission of a crime. To actually possess a firearm means that the defendant, A, carried a firearm on his person, or B, had a firearm within immediate physical reach with ready access with the intent to use the firearm during the commission of the crime. An issue in this case is whether defendant was present when the crime allegedly was committed. If you have a reasonable doubt that the defendant was present at the scene of the alleged crime, it is your duty to find the defendant not guilty. Michael Keatley has entered a plea of not guilty. This means that you must presume or believe he is innocent. This presumption of innocence stays with him as to each material allegation in the indictment through each stage of the trial, unless it has been overcome by the evidence to the exclusion of and beyond a reasonable doubt. To overcome his presumption of innocence, the state has the burden of proving that the crime with which he is charged was committed and that he is that person who committed that crime. Michael Keatley is not required to present evidence or to prove anything. Whenever the phrase reasonable doubt is used, you must consider the following. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt or a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of his guilt. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all, you do not have an abiding conviction of his guilt, or if you have a conviction of his guilt, it is one which is not stable, but one which wavers and vacillates, then the charge is not proved beyond every reasonable doubt, and you must find him not guilty because your doubt is reasonable. It is to the evidence introduced in this trial and to it alone that you are to look for that proof. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of Michael Keatley may arise from the evidence, from conflicts in the evidence, or from a lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt, you should find him not guilty. If you have no reasonable doubt, you should find him guilty. It is up to you to decide what evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in considering your verdict. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You should consider how the witnesses acted as well as what they said. Some things you should consider are: did the witness seem to have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified? Did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? Was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? Did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in the case? Has the witness been offered or received any money, preferred treatment, or other benefit in order to get the witness to testify? Has any pressure or threat been used against the witness that affected the truth of the witness's testimony? Did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? Has the witness been convicted of a felony? Whether the state has met its burden of proof does not depend upon the number of witnesses it has called or upon the number of exhibits it has offered, but instead upon the nature and quality of the evidence presented. The fact that a witness is employed in law enforcement does not mean that his or her testimony deserves more or less consideration than that of any other witness. Expert witnesses are like other witnesses with one exception. The law permits an expert witness to give his or her opinion. However, an expert's opinion is reliable only when given on a subject about which you believe him or her to be an expert. Like other witnesses, you may believe or disbelieve all or any part of an expert's testimony. It is entirely proper for a lawyer to talk to a witness about what testimony the witness would give if called to the courtroom. The witness should not be discredited by talking to a lawyer about his or her testimony. You may rely upon your own conclusion about the credibility of any witness. A juror may believe or disbelieve all or any part of the evidence or the testimony of any witness. Spanish has been used during this trial. The evidence you are to consider is only that provided through the official court interpreter. Although some of you may know Spanish, it is important that all jurors consider the same evidence. Therefore, you must base your decision on the evidence presented in the English translation. You must disregard any different meaning. If during testimony there was a question of the accuracy of English interpretation and steps were taken to resolve any discrepancies, and despite these efforts the discrepancy remains, I emphasize that you must rely only upon the official English interpretation as provided by the court interpreter and disregard any other contrary interpretation. You have heard testimony of eyewitness identification. In deciding how much weight to give to this testimony, you may consider the various factors mentioned in these instructions concerning credibility of witnesses. In addition to those factors, in evaluating eyewitness identification testimony, you may also consider the capacity and opportunity of the eyewitness to observe the offender based upon the length of time for observation and the conditions at the time of observation, including lighting and distance. Whether the identification was the product of the eyewitness's own recollection or was the result of influence or suggestiveness. The circumstances under which the defendant was presented to the eyewitness for identification. any inconsistent identifications made by the eyewitness, any instance in which the eyewitness did not make an identification when given the opportunity to do so, the witness's familiarity with the subject identified, lapses of time between the event and the identification, whether the eyewitness and the offender, let me start that over, apologize, whether the eyewitness and the offender are of different races or ethnic groups, and whether this may have affected the accuracy of the identification, the totality of circumstances surrounding the eyewitness's identification. The Constitution requires the state to prove its accusations against Michael Keatley. It is not necessary for him to disprove anything, nor is he required to prove his innocence. It is up to the state to prove his guilt by evidence. Michael Keatley exercised a fundamental right by choosing not to be a witness. You must not view this as an admission of guilt or be influenced in any way by his decision. No juror should be concerned that Michael Keatley did or did not testify at trial. A statement claimed to have been made by Michael Keatley outside of court has been placed before you. Such a statement should always be considered with caution and be weighed with great care to make certain it was freely and voluntarily made. Therefore, you must determine from the evidence whether his alleged statement was knowingly, voluntarily, and freely made. In making your determination, you should consider the total circumstances, including but not limited to 1, whether when he made the statement, he had been threatened in order to get him to make it, and 2, whether anyone had promised him anything in order to get him to make it. If you conclude that this out-of-court statement was not freely and voluntarily made, you should disregard it. These are some rules that apply to your discussions. You must follow these rules in order to return a lawful verdict. You must follow the law as it is set out in these instructions. If you fail to follow the law, your verdict will be a miscarriage of justice. There is no reason for failing to follow the law. Everyone is depending upon you to make a wise and legal decision. This case must be decided only upon the evidence that you have heard from the testimony of the witnesses and have seen in the form of the exhibits in evidence and these instructions. This case must not be decided for or against anyone because you feel sorry for anyone or because you are angry at anyone. Remember, the lawyers are not on trial. Your feelings about them should not influence your decision in any way. Your duty is to determine if Michael Keatley has been proven guilty in accord with the law. It is the judge's responsibility to determine a proper sentence if he is guilty. Whatever verdict you render must be unanimous, which means that each juror must agree to the same verdict. Your verdict should not be influenced by feelings of prejudice, bias, or sympathy. Your verdict must be based on the evidence and on the law contained in these instructions. Deciding a verdict is exclusively your responsibility. I cannot participate in that decision in any way. Please disregard anything I may have said or done that makes you think that I prefer one verdict over another. You may find the defendant guilty as charged in the indictment or guilty of such lesser included crimes as the evidence may justify or not guilty. If you return a verdict of guilty, it should be for the highest offense that has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If you find that no offense has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then of course your verdict must be not guilty. The verdict must be unanimous. That is, all of you must agree to the same verdict. Only one verdict may be returned as to each crime charged. The verdict must be in writing, and for your convenience, the necessary verdict forms have been prepared for you, and they are as follows. I'm going to hold it up briefly. It's multiple pages. I don't expect you to be able to read it from there, but this is the verdict that will go back in the room with you. It will be on top of the stack of instructions, and it is paper clipped, all of the pages of it. It reads as follows. State of Florida versus Michael Keatley. It then has the title verdict form. Under that, it reads, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 1. In parentheses, it says victim Sergio Guitron. And then in parentheses, it says check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your lettered selection. Choice A reads, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged. And then under that, there are 4 questions. 1 reads, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And then there are choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? And then choices for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? And then questions for yes or selections for yes or no. Question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Sergio Guitron? And then choices for yes or no. Choice B reads, the defendant is guilty of murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And then there are 4 questions. Questions read, number 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And then choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? And then choices for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? And then choices for yes or no. Turn to page 2 of the verdict form. At the top is question 4 of choice B. It reads, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Sergio Guitron? And then choices for yes or no. After that is choice C, which reads, the defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And then one question, which reads, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? And then choices for yes or no. And then choice D, which reads, the defendant is not guilty. Under that, it says, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 2, in parentheses, victim Juan Guitron. And then in parentheses, check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your letter. Choice A reads, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged. And 4 questions. Question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? With selections for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? And then selections for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? And then selections for yes or no. Question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Juan Guitron? And then selections for yes or no. Under that, choice B reads, the defendant is guilty of murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And there are 4 questions. Question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? With choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? With choices for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? With choices for selection yes or no. On the 3rd page at the top, question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Juan Guitron? And then choices for selections yes or no. Under that is choice C, which reads, the defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And under that, one question, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? And then choices for yes or no. Under that selection is choice D, which reads, the defendant is not guilty. After that, it reads, read the jury find as follows as to count 3. In parentheses, it says victim Gonzalo Guerrera. And in parentheses, it says check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your lettered selection. Choice A reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree as charged. And then there are 4 questions. Number 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Under that, choices yes or no. Under that, question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? Under that, choices for yes or no. Then question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause great bodily harm to Gonzalo Guevara? And then choices for yes or no. Under that, choice selection B says the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And then 4 questions. Question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? With selections for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? With selections for choices yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? On to the next page. Question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Gonzalo Guevara? With choices for selections yes or no. Under that, selection C, which reads the defendant is guilty of attempted manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And one question, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? Under that, with choices for yes or no. Then selection D, which is the defendant says the defendant is not guilty. Under that, it says, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 4, in parentheses, victim Daniel Beltran. After that, there are parentheses that say check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your lettered selection. Selection A reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree as charged. And then 4 questions. Question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And yes or no. Then question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm, with choices for yes or no? Then question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm, with choices for yes or no? Then question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause great bodily harm to Daniel Beltran? And then yes or no. Under that is selection B, which says the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And then 4 questions. The first question, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And then selections for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Then selections for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? Then selections for yes or no. At the top of the next page is question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Daniel Beltran? Then selections for yes or no. Then selection C, the defendant is guilty of attempted manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? And then selections for yes or no. And then D, the defendant is not guilty. Under that, it reads, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 5, victim Richard Cantu, check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your lettered selection. Choice A reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree as charged. And 4 questions. 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? And then yes or no. After that, 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? And then yes or no. Then question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? And then yes or no. And then under that, 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause great bodily harm to Richard Cantu? And then selections for yes or no. After that is choice B. The defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? With choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? With choices for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? With choices for yes or no. Then on the top of the next page is question 4, which says, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Richard Cantu? With choices for yes or no. Then selection C, which reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And 1 question, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? With choices for yes or no. And then selection D, which reads, the defendant is not guilty. Under that, it says, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 6. In parentheses, it says victim Ramon Galan. After that, it says check only one letter and answer all associated questions under your lettered selection. Choice A reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree as charged. And question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? With choices yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Then choices yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? Choices for yes or no. Question 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause great bodily harm to Ramon Galan? And then questions for yes or no. Then selection B reads, the defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the second degree, a lesser included offense. And question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a firearm? Then choices for yes or no. Question 2, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Then choices for yes or no. Question 3, did the defendant discharge the firearm? Then choices for yes or no. At the top of the next page, question number 4, did the discharge of the firearm cause the death of Ramon Galan? And choices for yes or no. Then selection C, the defendant is guilty of attempted manslaughter, a lesser included offense. And question 1, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use a weapon? And then choices for yes or no. Then selection D, which reads the defendant is not guilty. After that, it says, so say we all, dated this blank day of March 2023. And then there are 2 lines, one for the foreperson of the jury to sign and one for the foreperson of the jury to print their name. A separate crime is charged in each count of the indictment, and although they have been tried together, each crime and the evidence applicable to it must be considered separately, and a separate verdict returned as to each. A finding of guilty or not guilty as to one crime must not affect your verdict as to the other crimes charged. The attorneys now will present their final arguments. Please remember that what the attorneys say is not evidence or your instruction on the law. However, do listen closely to their arguments. They are intended to aid you in understanding the case. Each side will have equal time, but the state is entitled to divide this time between an opening argument and a rebuttal argument after the defense has given its closing argument. State ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, may I please report?
Certainly.
Defense counsel. Members of the jury, on November 25th of 2010, the defendant, Michael Keatley, dressed as a law enforcement officer, armed himself with his modified Glock 45 caliber weapon and started hunting for creeper. By Thanksgiving of 2010, he had already conducted his own investigation. He had healed enough that he could drive back in his ice cream van through the streets of Ruskin, Waimama, and there was one thing that he wanted. He wanted to know who had shot and robbed him. And by November of 2010, he believed that that was Creeper, based on a rumor, based on his own investigation. Person after person after person came into this courtroom and testified on that stand and said that he was looking for Creeper. He was asking about Creeper. He had already done his investigation. He had researched him. He researched him on his computer. He researched Ocean Mist. And he knew exactly where to find him. State's Exhibit 113, that composition notebook. After he had researched Creeper, found out his name was Omar, B-A-I, his notebook, his house, with the exact address of Omar Bayan, 507 Ocean Mist. He knew exactly where to find Creeper. All based on a rumor, all based on word on the street. That's exactly where he went to on November 25th of 2010. That is the only reason he was on that porch. That is the only person he asked for on that porch. This is not 507 Ocean Mist, the address on that notebook. This is 604 Ocean Mist. This is the Lucas home. This is where Juan and Sergio Guitron were hanging out with their friends when they were gunned down the early of 2010. You heard from two of the victims, Gonzalo Guevara and Daniel Beltran, and they told you. They said they saw a dark van, dark green, dark blue, solid one-color van come from this direction, from the left of this photo, the first time it came around. The crime scene is in the center of that photo. Around the loop, from where that vehicle came, is 507 Ocean Mist, Omar Bayan's house. That is where the defendant went first. And you heard from Omar Bayan. You heard that he was there at his home, but he was in bed. Him and his girlfriend were sleeping in the early morning hours of November 25th of 2010. Lights were out. Defendant went to that location. Who knows how long he parked there, looking for any sort of activity. When there wasn't any, because the lights are off, he drives around the circle, and what does he see? He sees 7 Hispanics out on that porch. And you know he is looking for Hispanic males. He believes Creeper is a Hispanic male. He believes Creeper is a Mexican. That is what he has told people he knows. That he is looking for Creeper, that he may have a tattoo on his arm, that he's Mexican, that he lives on Ocean Mist. You saw the photographs from his printer, part of his investigation. Mr. Guerra, another person he accused of doing this to him. Other Hispanic males. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office inquiries on his computer because he believed that Hispanic males were responsible for shooting and robbing him back in January of 2010. All of these victims, Ramon Galan, Richard Cantu, Gonzalo Guevara, Daniel Beltran, have all come in this courtroom and testified about what they remembered. This happened over 12 years ago, and they remember a lot about what happened. That had to be one of the scariest moments of their lives when that person approached, when the defendant approached dressed as law enforcement and in close range started shooting them one by one by one. You heard Daniel Beltran and you heard Gonzalo Guevara testify how they were next to Richard Cantu and saw the killer shoot him in the head. You heard all of those details, how they were ordered down to the ground on that porch, told to face away, told to get down on the ground, give them their IDs. And that's what they did. They were unarmed. They did what he wanted, and he shot them anyway. They have testified that there was a lot of drinking that happened prior to this incident, that there were drugs that were taken, cocaine and marijuana. And you can use that when you evaluate their testimony. But we ask you to look at all of the other evidence to see if that supports and corroborates what they say, what they said happened. And if you look at that crime scene, you know that they remembered the details of this night, that they remembered those details vividly because they were in fear for their life. They said that they were playing cards, that they did around a table, that they were lined up on that porch and shot while they were down on the ground of that porch. All of that blood on the porch corroborates what they said. Daniel Beltran testified how he was shot several times. After he was shot, one of those shots went through a window. It went through the window. He actually, still fleeing for his life, threw himself over the side of that porch. Well, the defendant is still shooting from the porch, shooting at him, and that somehow he is able to crawl and run and go through the side of that house, and that he tries to fling himself over a fence and that he breaks it. Can't get over the fence, he gets a chair. He's able to get over the chair. State's Exhibit 31. Where that yellow tape is, those are bullet holes. They were facing the house. The killer was behind him. That is evidence that they are telling the truth. Those are close-ups of those bullets. Mr. Guevara's ID. He had pulled it out because that is what was demanded of them. The killer was looking for a creeper and he wanted to see their IDs. Daniel Beltran fled across that backyard and dropped his ID because it was out. That's the fence he broke. He was bleeding at the time when he broke that fence. That's the chair that he put up against the fence so he could fling himself over it. The crime scene is evidence. What they said supports, that crime scene supports what they said happened that night. Those details were still fresh in their mind when they testified in front of you. The judge read to you what was the instructions for the elements of first-degree premeditated murder. To prove the first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. The victim is dead. The death was caused by the criminal act of Michael Keatley. There was a premeditated killing of the victim. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing, and the law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of a premeditated intent to kill and the killing. What happened on that porch on November 25th of 2010 to Juan and Sergio Guitron is premeditated murder. Defendant on that porch in close range, pointing a deadly weapon at them and pulling the trigger, making that decision is first-degree premeditated murder. He made a conscious decision to shoot them. He made a conscious decision to shoot Sergio Guitron in the back. That bullet entered his right back, went through his body, perforated his heart, his lungs, and his pulmonary artery, and then exited out of the left side. The trajectory of the bullet was back to front. Again, the information from the medical examiner's office corroborated what the victim said. He was shooting them from behind. They were facing the home. Juan Guitron shot twice in the back. He killed them after deciding to do it. He made the decision to pull the trigger. That is first-degree premeditated murder. But you know his plan started well before November 25th of 2010. Attempted murder. To prove the crime of attempted first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Michael Keatley did some act intended to cause the death of the victim that went beyond just thinking or talking about it. Michael Keatley acted with a premeditated design to kill the victim. The act would have resulted in the death of the victim, except that someone prevented Michael Keatley from killing the victim, or he failed to do so. In this case, with regards to Ramon Galan, Daniel Beltran, Richard Cantu, he failed to do that. They were able to get life-saving treatment. Again, he was shooting them close range, in the hand, in the chest, in the back. That is attempted murder, first degree. He would have killed them had they not got medical treatment. State's Exhibit 146. Reason that is up there, because when I talked to you and read you those instructions about murder and attempted murder, the one thing the state never has to prove is motive. It would be hard to prove motive in most cases because you're talking about why a killer kills people. What is the reasoning behind it? What is going on in their mind? The law never requires the state to prove murder. But in this case, the evidence of motive is overwhelming. And it all goes back to what happened in January of 2010 to the defendant. The defendant was a victim of a robbery and attempted murder. And it is truly horrible what happened to him. He was shot multiple times for $12. He was working, he was driving his ice cream van, just trying to make a living. And a young Black female approached him as a distraction, and then two armed men wearing ski masks broke into his van, stole $12, and shot him multiple times. There is no justification for that. It is unfair. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office responded to that crime. You heard from Deputy McMurtry. He was the first responder. You heard how we took an interview from the defendant, a brief one, and that he was transported to the hospital for his injuries. And you have heard a lot of evidence of how severe those injuries were. You heard from Dr. Halpern that he had a horrible blast injury to his right arm, that he had another gunshot wound to his left hand. Those injuries, nerve damage, were horribly painful. Back in January of 2010, when this first happened, he couldn't use either hand. Those were devastating injuries. It changed his whole life. He went from living on his own to living with his parents. He couldn't feed himself at that time. He couldn't use either hand. The impact to his life was devastating. The judge instructed you cannot base your decision on sympathy. What happened to him was horrible. The decision in this case is whether or not the defendant killed Juan and Sergio Guitron and the attempted murder of all of those other victims in this case. The same goes true with the victims. You can't use any sort of sympathy about the pain and the fear that they went through to base your decision. It has to be based on facts and evidence. Back in 2010, in January, when the defendant was shot and a victim of a horrible crime, he reported it to law enforcement. He did all of the right things. And you heard about that case. You heard about the investigation because it is motive in this case. It is unimaginable to go through what he did and get no justice for it. But I want to talk a little bit about what happened on January 23rd of 2010. The sheriff's office did respond. They did transport him to get medical attention. He, unfortunately, was the only eyewitness. And those two assailants, those two gunmen, were completely, their faces were completely covered with a ski mask. Never be able to identify them. He said that they were armed and that they had gloves on. The sheriff's office processed that scene. You heard about swabbing for DNA, lifting for prints, but you also heard from Navarro. He was the fingerprint analyst. You don't get fingerprints when people are wearing gloves. That is why those two criminals wore gloves, so that nothing would link them to that crime. You heard about blood being on the street, blood being in his van. He bled. He was the only one who bled. That is his DNA. Again, the assailants are covered, ski mask, gloves. They're not leaving their fingerprints behind. They're not leaving touch DNA behind. Those are the sources of DNA. That was always going to be a difficult case to make. He was able to give a description of a vehicle. No tag number, just a generic description of a vehicle. The only way the sheriff's office could have made that case, because there were no eyewitnesses, is if one of those assailants or that girl, those two gunmen, confessed to someone. Criminals don't confess to people when they rob people. So there was a reward that was offered, $5,000 reward. Any information, 2 black males, 1 light-skinned black female, age 17 to 20, driving a 92 or 93 light-colored Buick. That was information provided by him. He called the sheriff's office to check on his case. All reasonable. He heard from Detective Nolan, called a few times. There were leads they followed up on. It led to nothing. That had to be maddening, because he's still suffering. He still cannot use both of his hands. He's still in pain, and he's gotten no justice. And every time he calls the sheriff's office, there isn't any development. One of those last conversations with Detective Nolan is that he has started his own investigation. He has healed enough that he can drive that van and he can go into the neighborhoods and start talking to people. And he calls them and he tells them, you know what, I might have been mistaken when I said it was 2 black males. I just assumed. And Detective Nolan indicated some concern. He's like, are you changing your identification? Because you could hurt the case. You originally said 2 black males, and now you're saying it might be Hispanic males. And he told him he's not changing his identification. He told Nolan this was just based on word on the street, on a rumor. He could not give Detective Nolan one single witness. It's not his job. It's the sheriff's office job to find witnesses. This was all based on a rumor. And none of those individuals at 604 Ocean Mist met the descriptions, even remotely, of the ones that he gave on January 23rd of 2010. They were not 17 to 20. He was looking for a creeper. There were a bunch of Hispanic males on that porch, and he wanted to make sure that he got him. He didn't care who he killed on November 25th of 2010. This case, there is a rumor, right? There is a text message that goes out. There's a text message that goes to one person, to another person, to another person, to another person. That is not evidence. The sheriff's office was concerned about it. This case is not made on rumors. This case is made by evidence. The defendant was interviewed on a recording, and you heard both of those. And the first one was with Lieutenant Lugo and Detective Schramm. And you heard that prior to that interview, they had talked to Stacy Rogan. And she was in the hospital, unrelated to this case, some kind of leg injury. And she said that the defendant, who she personally knows, had approached her. She also used to drive an ice cream truck, and asked her about Creeper, and specifically told her to be on the lookout, but that is the person he believed robbed her. What does Lieutenant Lugo know at the time of the interview with Stacy Rogan? They've already started interviewing the victims who survived. The only thing the killer wanted was Creeper. So in the defendant's interview, which you heard in his own words, Lieutenant Lugo asked him 3 times. Lieutenant Lugo was always professional in that interview. There was no yelling. It's recorded. You can hear the defendant's voice for yourself. Have you been conducting your own investigation? They told him they were investigating the shootings that happened at 604 Ocean Mist on Thanksgiving. That's also on the tape. He's fully aware of why they want to talk to him. And 3 times he denies ever looking for Creeper. He knows what he said on that porch. He knows he cannot tell law enforcement that he is looking for Creeper, because that is the only thing the killer said to those witnesses, and he knows that they survived. Why does Daniel Beltran survive? He's wounded. He is crawling on the side of that house. The shooter stays on the porch. The shooter has injury. The defendant could not have pursued him. He shot him as often as he could from the only distance that he could manage. He went onto the porch. He shot all of those victims. If he had been an able-bodied person and wanted to make sure there were no victims left alive, he could have easily overtaken Daniel Beltran. It is because he is the killer. He is the only one who wanted Creeper dead. So let's talk about what's not a rumor. Let's talk about the evidence. Because law enforcement didn't rely on a rumor. They also walked the streets of Ruskin and Waimama. Stacy Rogan, an ex-girlfriend of the defendant. Defendant's looking for Creeper. He thinks that's the person who shot him. Johnny Sanchez, he just knows the defendant as the nice ice cream man. Just happened to see him on a route that he bought ice cream from him, right? He's not out to get the defendant. He's not a jilted girlfriend. Defendant's looking for somebody named Creeper. That's the guy he thinks shot him. Those are the defendant's words. All of this is motive. Luciano Alonso, he works for Anna's, that restaurant. Defendant's a regular customer. He likes the defendant. I know it's been a long trial, but do you remember his direct examination with Miss Hodges? Like pulling teeth. I know this happened 12 years ago. He did say that defendant was looking for Creeper at the restaurant. But he likes the defendant. Did you get that sense? Because 12 years later, when on cross-examination by the defendant's attorney, all of a sudden, he remembers the defendant needed a cane and couldn't walk normal. Ms. Hodges had to impeach her own witness. You heard how he didn't want to be here, that Lugo said he wouldn't have to come, didn't want to have a subpoena, and that Ms. Hodges had to impeach him because back in October of 2012, when all of this would have been the most fresh in his mind, in a recorded sworn interview to Lugo, he said he never saw the defendant with the cane. In fact, when he saw him after the shooting, he walked normal. He's certainly not lying that the defendant was looking for a creeper and that the defendant wanted revenge, that the defendant thought Creeper was the one who shot him. He believed it. Brianna Gregory, ex-girlfriend, she had only met him a couple of times. She's the one in that photograph, Halloween, where coincidentally he's dressed as a law enforcement officer. Do you think in October of 2010 that he's any big fan of law enforcement? Another witness in Ruskin, Waimama, that absolutely knows that the defendant is looking for Creeper. In that conversation with Detective Lugo, that is consciousness of guilt. He lied 3 times about asking about Creeper because he knows what he said on that porch. Wesley Smith, he knows the defendant. He's the machinist. He's the gun enthusiast. I know you remember him. He was on the stand a very long time. And he says that the defendant would come by, sell ice cream, and occasionally they would talk. And that the defendant had mentioned something about Creeper. He knows Omar Bayan, but he didn't know that Omar Bayan had the last name of Creeper. So when the defendant was asking about Creeper, he did not make that connection, but he said that he knew the defendant was asking about Creeper and that was the person who had shot him, and he lived somewhere there, over there on Ocean Mist. Carol Ardono, another person that knows the defendant, not an ex-girlfriend. She's someone who also used to sell ice cream. They knew each other in 2009. She was working with him. In fact, she wanted her son to work with him. She saw him right before the homicides and the attempted murder, and she said he came by in his white truck and was looking for her son because he wanted to ask her son about Creeper. And he said he had been hearing that Creeper was bragging about shooting and robbing him. And that he said something about Creeper being in Ocean Mist. On November 25th of 2010, this defendant absolutely knew that Omar Bayan had the nickname Creeper and lived at Ocean Mist. He was the one on that porch hunting for Creeper. Again, that composition notebook, 507 Ocean Mist, Bayan. Let's talk about the crime scene a little bit. These are shell casings. They are .45 caliber. There were 10 that were found at the crime scene. 9 of which were Winchesters. They're all .45s. They're all fired from the same gun. They all have that characteristic firing pin mark that is a class characteristic of a Glock firearm. I want to talk about this a little bit more, because those shell casings connect him and link him to this crime. But let's talk about what the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office did with them, because you heard some stipulations. They wanted to link the killer to the crime. So they have to find something that the killer would have touched. From all indication from the witnesses, he only went on the porch and then he left. So you heard about those shell casings, that they were fingerprinted and that they were swabbed for DNA. The only DNA we were able to get off of them were the victims, and obviously they bled all over the place. Those shell casings are mixed in with their blood. But the sheriff's office was hoping that the killer, before they put those shell casings into the murder weapon, they got to touch them, right? And just maybe, we might get a fingerprint. Or maybe, just maybe, and it's harder because touch DNA has to do with skin cells. Just maybe they touched it and left some DNA or sweat or epithelial, those skin cells. So they swab them, and you heard those stipulations. And you heard that there were no comparable prints. You heard that all the DNA, there was no foreign DNA, it's just the victims, it's just their blood. But I want to remind you of Norma Jean Towers, because she actually used to date the defendant. And she's been to his house many, many times. And she specifically testified about him disassembling and cleaning a gun and loading a gun. Had it all at the table there. And she specifically said that he was wearing gloves. Why would you need a glove or gloves to load a gun? Heard from Jennifer Clark, you don't need a glove. She does it all the time. There's no special equipment. She doesn't use gloves. But this defendant who has a hand injury, he still had a hand injury to that right hand, who was working. You heard from Jennifer Clark how you have to disassemble. There's little buttons you have to do to click on. He's got an injury to his right hand, which makes it difficult anyway. And when you're dealing with something, the best way to grip or hold on to a gun is always going to be with your bare hands. Those gloves are just going to make it more difficult, and he's already disabled. The only reason he would need to have gloves is because he specifically doesn't want to leave fingerprints on shell casings. Let's talk about David Beckwith. David Beckwith absolutely would not meet with law enforcement or the state attorney's office, my office, without a subpoena. He wanted immunity. He absolutely wanted immunity because he planned to kidnap and get rid of, make disappear with his good friend, the defendant, the people who robbed him. He had been on that ice cream truck with the defendant. He is a 3-time convicted felon. You absolutely should consider that when you're evaluating his testimony. He is who he is. But if you're going to commit a murder and plan that with someone, I suggest you are not going to do it with someone that is a law-abiding citizen. So let's talk a little bit more about David Beckwith. Because David Beckwith didn't go to the hospital to see all of those victims, to see Daniel Beltran, Gonzalo Guevara, Richard Cantu, Raymond Galan. David Beckwith would have no idea that the killer on Ocean Mist is dressed like law enforcement. But when he comes in, he tells law enforcement, this is what the plan is. And when that shooting happens, it's all over the news. Wesley Smith has heard him talk about Creeper and Ocean Mist. David Beckwith has seen him do his own investigation, was actually with him when somebody said it was Creeper, and the Creeper was bragging about it, and Ocean Mist came up. So all of a sudden, 6 innocent people are gunned down on Ocean Mist. You better believe David Beckwith is trying to get with law enforcement to say, look, I didn't have anything to do with this, but I will tell you everything. Let's talk about some of the stuff that is corroborated by David Beckwith, because a judge will tell you, and he already instructed you, that you can believe some of the witness's recollection, or you can believe parts of it, or all of it, or you don't have to believe any of it. Some of what David Beckwith was saying is absolutely corroborated by other evidence in this case. He said that the defendant was so obsessed with finding who had done this with him that he started accosting people on the street. Remember that? There was a young Hispanic girl. Defendant made her cry because he at that point thought she's no longer black. The girl that was involved in his crime was Hispanic. And there was some young girl that he thought it could have been her sister, and basically interrogated her and made her show a picture of her older sister. And then he said there was another time where they were back on Ocean Mist, but this time he didn't think it was Creeper. This time he thought it was Armando Guerra. Armando Guerra. Ronaldo Guerra is his uncle, and he lives on Ocean Mist. And he's in his ice cream truck, and he approaches Ronaldo Guerra, and he says, your nephew is the one who robbed me. So on another occasion, when Armando Guerra is visiting his uncle, the defendant comes by in his ice cream truck, and Armando Guerra confronts him and said, look, why are you saying I robbed you? I don't rob you. David Beckwith testified that was just another incident of the defendant searching for who had robbed him. Their testimony corroborates what David Beckwith said. Let's talk about the witnesses who said the defendant had a gun. There's a lot of them. Stacy Rogan. Yep, the defendant had a gun, right? One of the ex-girlfriends. Carol Arduino, not an ex-girlfriend. She saw him with a gun before he was shooting in 2019 when she is in the van with him, his ice cream van. That is something that he carried in there in a little box. She doesn't know if it's a revolver, doesn't know, but seen him with the gun. Norma Jean Towers. She's been over at his house. She's seen him with more than one. Remember that drum magazine? The big rifle in the case. I'm not going to pull it out. He was excited when they were dating. That drum magazine kind of makes it look like a Tommy gun, right? State's Exhibit 126, the long rifle that's in the giant case over there. He had gotten it mail order, right? This at a gun show. In the summer of 2010, he's getting firearms at gun shows, in the mail, at Publix. She says they go target shooting. He's got a .45. This murder weapon in this case shoots .45 caliber bullets. David Beckwith says the defendant had a Glock. Yes, he described it Gold lining, not the way a Glock looks. Harmon Smith says he has a firearm. She went with her husband, Wesley Smith, to the Keatley property to go shoot guns. She doesn't know what type of gun he was shooting. She was shooting a small one. Wesley Smith says, defendant has a Glock. He's got a Glock 45. Invited me to go target shooting on his property. Let me shoot it. We shot at some car, some van that was there. It's a 45. You don't have to rely on any one of those witnesses because the defendant told you himself. In that interview with Lieutenant Lugo that is recorded, Lieutenant Lugo specifically asked him, do you have a Glock? He's like, yeah, Glock 21. Lugo reiterates, one that shoots 45s? Yes. That's uncontroverted. He had a Glock 21 that shoots the very type of shell casings and ammunition that was used at 604 Ocean Mist. State Exhibit 123. That is a magazine, and it's in evidence, and you can pull it out because the lighting's a little bit dark in this, but it has a signature Glock emblem on the butt of that magazine. It belongs to a 45 caliber Glock. It's in his pantry. Remember that interview? Lugo's like asking about it, says he'll give it to him. He's not under arrest. He's not detained. Lugo wants addresses. Eventually he says, get a warrant. They did. And there was a lot of questioning by Mr. Escobar, how he waited all that time. This started in the early afternoon. He's over at the sheriff's office, District 4, no vehicle. And you heard that as soon as that traffic stop happened, they secured a blue and silver minivan. They secured it so they could get a search warrant. And then after his interview, they secured both that trailer that he used to live in, the Keatley property over on Bonita Drive, where he lived with his parents at the time, all the other vehicles, the white truck that he had no problem driving, all of those vans and vehicles that were used for target practicing, and they absolutely would not let him have access to any of it. And they searched it all. They did grid searches. They found a spent casing, a 45 located near a burn pit. They found Winchesters, a box of them in the upstairs bedroom that hadn't been opened, 45s. And they searched everything. And they cannot find the defendant's Glock that shoots 45s and belongs to that magazine because he got rid of it. It is a murder weapon. He got rid of it before the sheriff's office secured that search warrant. And I'm going to go back to that in a second. But now let's talk about witnesses that say that the defendant could shoot a gun. The defendant absolutely has disabilities. Dr. Halpern was his treating physician, and nobody is going to say that the defendant is faking any sort of injury to his right hand. He had radial nerve damage. It had not healed at all, but he had healed a lot. His left hand was completely and totally healed, except for it had a little bit less of strength, about half of what it should be. Not what you would expect from an adult male, but he still had grip strength And other than that, completely 100% functional. No injury to his left shoulder, right? The defendant could shoot a gun on November 25th of 2010 because he certainly shot one many times before then, right? After his injury. Norma Jean Towers. Defendant has target practice set up on his property. Practice makes perfect, right? There's a reason why he's got a target practice, why he's got all of those vans and old vehicles shot up on his property. Because he wants revenge. Those witnesses we went through one by one by one, some of them still very friendly. Mr. Luciano Alonso said when he talked about Creeper, he wanted revenge. Norma Jean Towers had a romantic relationship with the defendant. She was dating him. And one of the things they did when she was at his house was target practice. Remember that? Saw him with the gun. He was target practice. Skilled and adept enough to teach her. Because she's not a gun person. She's not a gun enthusiast. She's part of the karaoke set. She doesn't know Wesley Smith. She doesn't know David Beckwith. She's got no relationship. This isn't a giant conspiracy to improperly frame him. Everybody who we put up here said that they started not to notice his injuries. She couldn't remember what hand he was shooting with, but she didn't notice. Dr. Halpern said, anything that you could have done with your right hand, you can learn to do with your left. And he had gotten so adept at that people weren't even noticing. They didn't take note of how he was shooting. And he was adept enough that he was acting as her teacher at the target range. His target range. David Beckwith said he was shooting with him. No problem shooting a full clip, right? The 45. Carmen Smith, she went with her husband to his property, target practice. Ben was doing an awful lot of target practice on his property. The same time, he's looking for the people who shot and robbed him. Carmen Smith can't tell you what hand he was using. She wasn't in a position to, because she, for safety reasons, is at the back of the vehicle. She just didn't see it. She didn't see how he used the gun or which hand he used. Her husband, Wesley Smith, doesn't remember what hand he was shooting with. The only difficulty, he said, not with shooting, but with the magazine when they were reloading the clip. When you get to the last one or two, it became difficult. And he said the defendant needed some assistance with that. The defendant can shoot a gun. All of these photos, exhibit number 151, 152, these are on his property. That's what he's practicing out there. You know who else says he target practice? Guy he went to high school with, the defense witness, James Kennedy. He's buying, what did he refer to as? Some kind of kiddie rifle, a rifle for kids. What do we know about the defendant? He doesn't have full adult strength in his grips, right? Why would the defendant need a kiddie rifle? Because he is looking for weapons that will make it easier for him to shoot and easier to handle so he can carry out his plan of revenge. That's not the only gun that he bought. You heard about him going to gun shows. You heard about Wesley Smith talking about a modification kit that they had a conversation about. He is disabled. He still had an injury, but he was able to shoot and fire a weapon. And although Mr. Kennedy didn't see the defendant do anything, he had, even today, a specific recollection if the defendant wanted that kid's rifle so he could do what? Target shoot, target practice. Dr. Halpern, he is the expert on the defendant's injuries. And a lot of questions were put to him based on what he could and couldn't do with the weapon solely based on his right hand. But his left hand is perfectly functional. You can learn to write with your left hand after you've been a dominant right person. You can learn any other skill to do with your left hand. Defendant absolutely could shoot and had the willpower, the mindset, and the ability and the capability to shoot on November 25th of 2010. Now I want to talk about the ballistics, because we've shown you all of those shell casings, and I'm not going to pull them back up. There are 10 from Ocean Mist, 9 of which are Winchesters, the other one another brand, all 45 calibers. All of them, after Jennifer Clark examined them, she doesn't have the murder weapon. She can determine if she had the murder weapon, whether or not those shell casings were fired by the murder weapon. But we don't have it because he got rid of it. But what she can do is she can compare them all together. And she says that they all were fired out of the same firearm. And you heard about those proficiency tests that she's put on under by those external companies every year by the FDLE. They have an external company come in, unassociated with them. And that external company actually provides them and knows when they're looking at shell casings, which ones are fired in the gun and which ones are not. And she is tested and has compared them under her microscope. And she has never failed one of those proficiency tests. And every time she has been able to discern which shell casings were fired out of the same gun and which were not, by examining them under that microscope. So when she talks about the shell casings, she can say they are all fired out of the same firearm, but she doesn't have a gun to test fire to compare it to. But there is some class characteristic information she can give us about them. Because Glock and other manufacturing firearms dealers, when they manufacture guns at the same plant, they have a specific way of making their guns. And Glock has a signature class characteristic on the way that their firing pin is set up, along with the slide and that port that the shell casings fall out of, that produces some distinct marks on a shell case that has been fired in a Glock weapon. And one of it is that elliptical mark. And some of it has to do with the markings that are made on the base of that shell casing. Because when those gases explode, when that gun is fired and that bullet is projected out, expands in that casing and forces that casing around and up so that it hits that gun. And looking at all of that had class characteristics that are signature to Glock. Big surprise. The one gun we can't find is his Glock 45 caliber gun. All of those 10 shell casings were fired in the same gun. And there is a shell casing that is found on his property. And we know that prior to the homicide, he had been firing that 45 Glock on his property. And law enforcement found that shell casing. They compared it to the 10 from 604 Ocean Mist. And that was fired in the same gun that is the murder weapon in this case. So now I want to talk about the projectiles. There's 5 projectiles that are found in Ocean Mist, right? There are projectiles that were found in that van that he uses for target practice. The sheriff's office found out about the target practice. They talked to Wesley Smith. Wesley Smith's like, oh, Lieutenant Lugo, we target practice there. He had a Glock. You know what? When my wife and I were over there shooting, after we fired that gun, as well as some other weapons that Wesley Smith brought over there, we picked all the shell casings up. We still have them. They're out in some container store or container on their property in Plant City. Lugo goes over to get them. So the 5 projectiles that are found on Ocean Mist were examined by Jennifer Clark. And just like she's proficiency tested in shell casing, she's also tested in projectiles. Same results, never failed. She has been blind tested and absolutely can pick out what projectiles are fired in the same gun and discern which ones are not. And she examined all of the projectiles at the scene. They all were fired in the same gun. Additional evidence that corroborates those victims. One gunman, one gun. The projectiles that are taken from the van, not all of them. Some of the projectiles in that van were submitted, and Jennifer Clark said they too are connected and fired in the same gun as the projectiles in Ocean Mist. Again, linking him to the murder weapon. There were some projectiles that were found in that van that did not match those projectiles. Also makes sense. There was more than one gun fired on his property, but that does not diminish the ones that link him to the murder scene. Now, you heard some hypotheticals up there. You've heard a lot about modifications, and this is why. The defendant modified that gun. You know he is looking for guns that are easier to control, easier to shoot, so that he can carry out his plan to kidnap the people who did this and kill them. He's going to mail orders. He's going to gun shows. He's going to Publix. So those projectiles, there's actually a database. So again, in order for her to say what specific gun it is, she has to have the gun. But there actually is a database that logs class characteristics of projectiles. And you heard her spit out a bunch of different manufacturers that could have been the manufacturer of the barrel that shot out the projectiles. The projectiles go through a different part of the gun, right? It's not going through the port of the gun where the shell casings are. It's going through the barrel. You heard Mr. Escobar ask about the rifling. There's a unique pattern. And based on that pattern, she's able to put it in her database, and a bunch of potential manufacturers are spit out that have those class characteristics, none of which are Glock. That gun was modified with a different barrel. And that is why we presented some of that computer evidence, because there were some search for barrels, not of a Glock, but before this crime, this defendant or somebody on that laptop searching coincidentally for barrel replacement. There is modification to that gun. And Jennifer Clark on cross-examination said, no, it's not any of these manufacturers that I said, because they don't make a aftermarket barrel for Glock. They make aftermarket barrels for their own guns. But there are a lot of, she said, there's a lot of aftermarket manufacturers that specialize in making those barrels for other gun manufacturers to be interchanged with. Kind of like when you go to Amazon, you buy a Yeti cup. They only make replacement parts for Yeti cups. There are a bunch of companies, knockoff companies, that then go into business offering cheaper replacement parts for Yeti. Kind of like that situation. But Jennifer Clark can't go out and guess and buy all the other aftermarket barrels on the market to determine what kind of brand we're dealing with. She needs the firearm that is used. So let's talk about getting rid of evidence. Let's talk about getting rid of the murder weapon. Because Henry Bowes testified via video, and Henry Bowes is good friends with the defendant. On Thanksgiving Day weekend, on Black Friday, on a holiday weekend, you remember Carrie Bowes not too happy? The defendant's just showing up. She's got a 9-year-old daughter. It's Thanksgiving Day weekend. Defendant arrives unannounced. When Lugo questions him about the minivan, because he's driving a blue minivan to a party on the night of November 25th of 2010. It is a dark minivan that is driven to the homicide scene by the killer. And specifically when Lugo is asking him in that interview, because it's of interest to him that he stopped in a minivan, he's like, you got a blue minivan, right? You're driving a blue minivan on November 25th of 2010. Lie number 5 for the defendant. No, it's blue and silver. None of the victims described a multi-colored minivan, a two-toned minivan. He knows he needs to alter the appearance. So he drives all the way to Tarpon Springs Friday after Thanksgiving to get it two-toned. Defendant is very adept. He's not completely healed. He still has injury to his right hand. But remember, Carrie Bowes, he gets there first. He gets there before Henry Bowes does. The defendant gets to her house before, and she says he needs trash bags. And she specifically described the type they were. The large, heavy, black trash bags. And that he is able to clean out the inside of the car, something he doesn't need to do. And she says she's out there, she doesn't see what he's putting it in, but that he has 2 large black trash bags and 2 smaller Publix bags. And that he has cleaned out the interior of that car. Not sure exactly what he put in it, but there's still a lot of trash in there. So what is he throwing away inside of this car that is going to fill 2 heavy trash bags that he absolutely has to do the day after Thanksgiving at Henry Bowes' house? Well, we never find a police officer's uniform. We never find the Glock that is used in this case, or any other sort of modification that may have been used. Carrie Flansburgh went to visit the defendant twice in the hospital. She didn't have any grudge against the defendant. What did she say that he said to her the day after Thanksgiving, November 26th of 2010? He's still talking about what happened to him. But he said that it was 2 black males. He is back to saying, just like he did to Lugo, that it was 2 black males who was responsible for shooting him. That is because, just like Norma Towers said, he is very savvy. There is a reason why when Lugo and Schramm are questioning him, he is back to, oh no, I never said it was Hispanics. I never said it was Creeper. It's 2 black males. But what does Carrie Bowes also tell you? She is the one that hands him the garbage bags, that he's cleaning it ahead of time. But when you ask Henry Bowes about it, his good friend who's willing to two-tone his car the day after Thanksgiving, he says, oh, it must have been all of the paper that was on the car. These are the very trash bags that he alluded Detective Lugo to that had already been collected, so Lugo couldn't get them. He's now saying on the stand, oh, it probably is the paper that we removed from the car after the painting. The other thing I want to talk about is the phone records. But before I talk about the phone records, I want to talk about what Carrie Flansburgh said he was able to do. She described that he had no issue cleaning the car, filling out those trash bags. She said he predominantly used his left hand, but when he would use his right hand, he would be supporting it with his left hand. She specifically said when he's holding it, he never had to go like this, very awkwardly, as it was suggested, like that's the only way he could pick up something. That's the only way he can do something. How awkward is that? They all must have noticed. No, a good person who visited him twice in the hospital said he had no issue cleaning out that car. The other thing he did is he wiped down the interior. Something that you do not have to do when you're painting the outside. She gave him some Dawn dishwater soap. So when you're in close range and you're shooting person after person after person, they bleed and they spatter. And for some reason, he needs to wipe down the interior of the dirtiest car that's being painted. The other thing that I now want to talk about with Henry Bowes is the defendant's phone records. Because you've heard about phone records, and we called the record custodian, and you're like, why are you giving us this information about phone records? The reason we're doing that is because Detective Schramm purposely, in his second interview, confronted the defendant and says, look, you got a cell phone? We're going to be able to tell where you were. And the defendant is adamant. He's adamant. He's like, get my phone records. It's going to show where I was. I'm at home. The defendant knows that a phone can track you. He purposely left it at home. We got these phone records, and between near when the crime happened, there's no activity. We can't prove one way or the other where he was at the time of the scene. But he's adamant. He's like, go get him. You're not going to put me at the scene. What is interesting about Henry Bowes' testimony is the one person who he has taken the vehicle he drove to the homicide to get him to paint it, he won't use his own phone to call him because he knows they're going to get his phone records. He doesn't want them to be linked to Henry Bowes. Because remember that dialogue back and forth? Why is she asking, what phone did he call you on? Remember that? He says, try to call him back. And you know what happened? It sounded like a fax machine. But then I asked him, well, he also needed to make a phone call. And guess what? 2010, we all have cell phones. He won't use Henry Bowes' phone. And Henry says, my son was there. He could have used his cell phone. He doesn't want any trace linking him back to Henry Bowes, the place where he took to alter the appearance of the car. So much so that when he is there and he stays all night because there's an urgency to get his parents' car painted, that he has to be driven to a gas station to make a call. That is consciousness of guilt. He identified the defendant in court. He is the one who identified him in that photo pack. And he is certain. He told you he is 1,000 or 2,000% certain. You have heard a lot about that photo pack and how some of that SOP was not followed, that there are various circumstances and that there are guidelines. Regardless if there were any mistakes made by law enforcement, and there was one that was specifically noted by Lieutenant Lugo, and that is the 3 and the 4. And he initialed it so that everybody would know he made a mistake. He's in the hospital. He had severe gunshot wounds. He's in the ICU. There is a photo that is being passed around. He said he never saw it. Do you think somebody who is in and out of comas, hallucinating, is going to be playing around on his phone? He says the first photos that were shown to him were by Detective Lugo, Lieutenant Lugo now. And then when he saw that photograph, that he immediately got that face is something he will never forget. He literally had an emotional reaction. Lieutenant Lugo noted the same thing. He has to show the entire photo pack, but when they got to his picture, he says Gonzalo Guevara starts shaking. That he looks like he's tearing up. He has to finish the photo pack. He does. And the only photo that is signed by Gonzalo Guevara is that defendant's picture. Gonzalo Guevara, no one more than a victim in a case wants to have the perpetrators come to justice. Defendant is a lesson in that. When you are injured, when you are unjustly shot, when you have to watch your friends being shot in front of you, do you want to get it right? And he was right. Because the one person that he picked out is the same person, the only person driving in the streets of Ruskin looking for Creeper. The only thing the person, the killer, said on November 25th of 2011. Gonzalo Guevara didn't know the defendant was looking for Creeper. Didn't know, so much so that witness after witness after witness after witness in Ruskin who knew him as the ice cream man would come in here and tell all of you He absolutely was looking for Creeper because he wanted him to suffer like he suffered. Those are statements that he made to those witnesses, that he wanted revenge. But he killed all of those brothers, Juan and Sergio Guitron, based on a rumor. And he shot all of those other victims based on a rumor. All of the evidence in this case points to one person, and that is the defendant seated right over there, the person who had a grudge against Creeper, Omar Bayan. After you consider all of the evidence, we are confident that you will hold him responsible for all of those attempted homicides that he did, for both of those murder charges that he did. All of the evidence points to the defendant. He is connected by the ballistics. He's connected by all of those witnesses to his investigation and the statements of his hate and his revenge.
We have the attorney's approach. Attorneys briefly, and realizing that the defense now has to do their closing, and then the state will have to do their rebuttal, and it is 12 o'clock or a couple minutes before 12 o'clock. We had ordered sandwiches anyway from the lunch counter for noon, so I sent a bailiff to go and see if we could grab them early. But we're going to take about a 45-minute break so that you'll have enough time to have a break, eat your lunch, and then we'll come back in and pick up. So it is much shorter than a normal lunch break, but we're going to keep you in the room. We're going to get you sandwiches in a few minutes, and then we'll bring you back in about 45 minutes. Please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or anyone else. Please do not do any research related to the case, and please avoid all reports of the case outside the courtroom. We'll see you back in just a little bit. All right. Jury has exited. Everyone may be seated, and the door is closed. All right. There's one of the verdict form. I think I realized after the second or third, and you all realized as well, and you've made the corrections on from death to great bodily harm. It is a total of four.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. So now the verdict form is going back there is correct, has the correct language. How would you like me to address it with them? I think I can very briefly let them know that when read, and I've got them marked on the old form, I can go to each one and say, question 4 said death. It now says great bodily harm, which is consistent with the instructions that I read, because the instructions were right. It was just the wrong wording in the verdict form.
I'm fine with
an economy of words so that it doesn't
Okay.
become
I'll just explain it. Let them know
very
that
briefly.
we made some corrections to the verdict form and why we made them.
Yes,
And I'll do that if there's no objection to it when I bring them back in right before Mr. Escobar starts his closing. Did you need a minute?
No, sir. I heard noise and I turned and was scared of a gavel. So that'll.
Gavel shot now. Remember who caused that?
It was not me, for the record.
No, but
I know. I got most of the hearing back in my left ear.
still got it. I
I-
still use it.
I know you do. That's why I'm not asking to approach. So yeah, that'll be fine.
All right.
I don't think.
Let me know if there's anything else. It's we broke right before 12 o'clock. I said 45 minutes, so we'll come back right before 12:45. So probably if we can try to be ready to go at 12:40, that's probably exactly 45 minutes.
That'd be great. I did.
You're not gonna use any of this, are you?
Oh, also do this. I know Ms. Escobar wanted to go get to his lunch because he needed the full 45 instead of the 30 that I was trying to give him. You all do whatever you need setting the courtroom up during this 45-minute break.
We will.
All right, thank you.
What time are we supposed to be back? Just
12:40.
Okay, pardon.
All right.
I don't think that's any of this.
I remember to turn the mic back on. I thought she did a great job. Wow. She made some points that I hadn't thought of. Things that are interesting. I think that's one of the reasons they tell the jurors to rely on their own memory, because some of the things she said, I don't remember hearing. So I would have to rely on my own memory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the live here and I will pick it back up at 12:40 Eastern time. That would be 11:40 Central. That'll give us all time to switch from coffee to another beverage. Get your popcorn, get a sandwich. I want one of those sandwiches, Judge, because I know you probably went to a really good sub place. Yeah. Or pizza. That would be good too. Okay. Never mind. I'm not really hungry for lunch. So, all right. I will see everybody back at 11:40 Central Time, 12:40 Eastern. Thanks, guys. See you then. Get your crafts ready too.